So I welcome you to our first meeting of June 2020 here in the Alpharetta City Council chambers. We'll note for the record that all members of council are present and accounted for. And I'll call this meeting to order. If you will, please join us. We always begin the meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. If you have a copy of tonight's agenda, first portion of tonight's meeting will be the consent agenda. If you do not have a copy and would like one, there should be some available in the back of the room. Consent agenda this evening consists of the council meeting minutes from the meeting on May 26, 2020. Second item is alcoholic beverage license applications PH-20-AB-06 Five Guys Taverns LLC, DBA Taffer's Tavern on 33 South Main Street, Suite 100, Alpharetta, Georgia 30009. Is there anyone who would like to remove anything from the consent agenda this evening? Seeing none, I'll call for a motion.
Motion to approve.
Second.
I have a motion by Councilman Burnett, a second by Mayor Pro Tem Mitchell. All those in favor of approving the consent agenda, please vote yes, otherwise vote no. And it does pass unanimously. So that'll wrap up the consent agenda, and we'll move on to the public hearing items for this evening. First public hearing item is E-20-04 Burlington sign exception. And it looks like Ms. Cook has stood up, so I assume she's presenting this item this evening. Please.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. The public hearing item before you is Burlington sign exception. The map of the location shown to you on the screen. The applicant is requesting a consideration of a sign exception to allow a second wall sign on the front elevation of a building and one wall sign on the north elevation of a building. The two additional wall signs are the Burlington Heart logo. Let me show you what that looks like. So here's the front elevation. And A actually exists on the building. That's 155 square feet. That sign already exists, and it's internally lit. The applicant is looking to add C, which is 16 square feet at the front, and it would not be internally lit. And they're also requesting B, which would be internally lit, and I'll show you what that looks like. So that would be at the end of the building. It's the heart on the top of the front facade. The code actually allows one wall sign per frontage. They do have two it actually allows another wall sign at the end of a shopping center. So by code, they're allowed the 155 square foot sign they have on the front, and they would be allowed a second sign that would be on the end of the building. That's kind of on the southwest side of the building. That would be 155 square feet. So they're actually looking for a reduction if this variance is approved. This would be a 39% reduction with the smaller signs, with the small heart located on the front and then also the side. They're allowed 312 square feet. Requested sign area is 191, so that is, of course, a reduction. We are recommending approval of the request. This is similar to Studio Movie Grill, where it's smaller signs, more signs, but they're smaller in size, and we actually have less signage. Recommendation is to approve with the following three conditions. One, wall sign, location, size, type, color, and illumination shall be limited to submitted plans with final approval by staff, except to comply with the conditions below. Two, the two additional wall signs shall not be internally illuminated. And 3, no additional wall signs shall be permitted for the applicant's tenant space. And that concludes staff presentation. If you have any questions, I'll be glad to try to answer those.
Do we have any questions from council at this time? Thank you, Ms. Cook. Do we have an applicant here?
Hi, my name's Scott Bilbrey. I'm with Blair Sign Programs. I'm their sign and graphics designer for nationwide in San Diego, California, 9932 Prospect Avenue in Santee. We are asking for a small exception. The only difference we would like the side sign, which would be sign B, to be reverse lit, so it'd give a nice shadow effect of the sign itself, and it would not be face lit. But besides that, I think the city's been very generous with their code. Do you have any questions for me?
Thank you, sir. Do we have any questions from council for the applicant?
I do.
Councilwoman Richard.
I'm sorry, Scott, can you just talk a little bit about the difference between reverse lit versus the internally lit?
Internally lit would be a face lit sign, which the face of the sign would illuminate. So if you're looking at the sign A right now, if you look at it, the whole heart would light up. Mm-hmm. But with it being reverse lit, you would just get an outline of the sign being lit and the square box. We don't have an elevation up, but there's a square box, just like the sign B. There's a small square that goes around it. So you'll have a shadow around the box and a shadow around the edge of the letter itself. That would bounce off the wall and give you a glow. Thank you.
Okay. And so you're looking for the reverse lit for just the north elevation?
Just
additional sign?
Yes, the sign C would be non-illuminated.
Okay.
That's their standard. It's just it's a wayfinding. So when someone's walking underneath the sign, you can, that's Burlington's entrance. Sign B would be to get some directional for the far side of the parking lot, just a vehicle wayfinding, basically.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Any other questions from council for the applicant? Thanks, sir.
Thank you.
Ms. Cobb, do we have any comment cards from the public on this item?
We do not, sir.
But if there's anyone who came out this evening to talk about the Burlington sign exception application, now's your opportunity to come forward. Seeing no one, we'll close public comment. Do I have a motion from council?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I'll offer a motion to approve E-20-04 Burlington sign exception. I will make a recommendation to make a change to condition number 2. The 2 additional wall signs shall not be internally illuminated, and I will add north elevation sign may be reverse lit, and no other changes to conditions 1 or 3.
Second.
I had a motion by Councilwoman Richard. I believe the second was by Councilman Binder. Is everyone clear on the motion? Motion was to approve. All right, seeing none. Any comments? All right, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor of the motion to approve the application as explained by Councilwoman Richard, please vote yes. Otherwise, vote no. And it does pass 6-1. Second item up on our public hearing agenda this evening is the public hearing on the fiscal year 2021 budget millage rate levy. Mr. Harris, you have the floor.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. This is the first of 3 public hearings on the fiscal year 2021 budget. In a few minutes, I believe I'm next on the agenda to actually bring forward the first reading of the budget ordinance and the first reading of the millage rate ordinance. Purpose tonight is just really to follow with state statute and ensure that we have a moment where the public can come up and comment about the budget.
Do we have any questions from council on this item? Seeing none, thank you. Ms. Cobb, do we have any public comment cards on this item?
We do not, sir.
But now is your opportunity to come forward and speak on 2021 fiscal budget. If you would like to come forward, now is your chance. Seeing no one, we'll close public comment. Do we have a motion from council? No motion? Okay. I guess we'll move on then. So that'll wrap up the public hearing agenda, and we'll move on to the new business items. First new business item will be the approval of the fiscal year 2021 budget and millage rate levy. Correct.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. As just mentioned, this is the actual formal adoption process, the first of two readings of the budget ordinance and the actual millage rate levy for the fiscal year. There's been no changes in the budget document as it was last presented at the last workshop. So.
Okay. And since this is the first time we'll be voting on this item, I do want to take just a moment to kind of explain how we got to this point, since this is the recommended budget that I put together at staff's advice with a lot of input from City Council. So, Tom, there are a few things that I'm not sure the public's aware of I'd like to have you address, just to point out some of the key points in the budget that we've presented this evening. And could you explain, I kind of went back through the presentation to highlight a few of the things, and on page 12 of the presentation that you put together, it was talking about the cost of government. And I wanted to mention that because the cost of government, there were a couple of key points that I don't think came up in the earlier presentations or the discussion, and that was that the portion of the millage rate in what we're presenting that funds debt service is estimated to decrease from 0.93 mils in the current budget to 0.815 mils in the fiscal 2021 budget. And I bring that up because we haven't really discussed the fact that because we're moving that millage rate from debt to general fund, we're actually giving a tax cut of $100,000 to the taxpayers, right? Because moving the money from debt relief to the general fund, operating expenses, removes that from the homestead exemption.
The homestead exemption applies to the operating millage, so we are shifting that over, to the general fund and
Right.
raising that millage rate. So there will be a shift, a savings.
Of $100,000 according to this. It goes,
In total,
because
yeah, in total.
taxpayers were paying $700,000 when it was going towards debt because the homestead exemptions didn't apply the same way. So they're getting a $100,000 tax cut by moving that millage rate. Although we had to advertise that there was a tax cut and a tax increase because we were just shifting that money from debt obligation to general operating expenses. But in effect, that reduces the tax burden by $100,000. So I thought that was notable, and I don't know that, although I'm sure you covered it at some point, that we really talked about that very much. Next thing I wanted to point out was that on page 15, and we're talking about, because we've talked a lot about the instability of projected revenues and the volatility in today's world given the COVID virus and everything else that's been going on. So in the proper use of fund balance, which is the lower section on page 15, I just wanted to clarify, we've pulled back a lot of what was originally designated for expenditures, and the budget that I have recommended here is not one that we would have recommended 3 months ago. In fact, it's very different than the one that we began recommending because we had a lot more items that were in the budget. Some of them have been mentioned by council members during the workshops. Those were items that typically I would have recommended. However, as we had the workshops, there was a great deal of concern about the instability of projected revenue streams. And so I pulled back what I think would be typical good financial management and project allocation to provide for those reserves. But we really haven't talked a great deal about the fact that in addition to the $4 million that we moved from unallocated capital into operating expenses, that in addition to all those reserves we've put aside for that, there's $15 million that is still in reserves that we retain for a case of emergency.
Correct.
So
Correct.
even if the 4.3 million, I believe it is,
4.1.
4.1, pardon, that we're setting aside out of the money streams and projected budget revenues and things like that. In addition to that, we still have a rainy day fund of $15 million.
Correct.
Should things end up being worse than what we're already expecting. Okay?
That is correct.
I just want to make sure, because like I said, I know council's looked over these documents, but we haven't really talked about a lot of that in depth, so I wanted to touch on that right quick. And just as a matter of note, because this is something I just became aware of a couple of days ago, one of the concerns we've had for months now is that because the economy was so healthy over the past couple of years, a lot of our public works projects, our infrastructure projects, the costs had gone up and revenue streams had not, and especially when it came to T-Splosh. So I thought I'd share a little good news that the other day when Pete Sasevich, our public works director, finally got bids for the windward eastbound and westbound projects that are T-Splosh projects. We originally had those budgeted for a total of $2 million each, and $2 million for each direction improvements, for a total of $4 million. The bids have actually come in, and the total expenditure on that, instead of $4 million, is $1.8 million. So that is a tiny sliver of good news in what hasn't been exciting bidding processes up until very recently. So I did want to share those. I also wanted to point out that, and I don't have the page written down for this, but as you mentioned in the effects of what we're doing throughout this budget, that there's new tax cuts in effect this year.
Correct.
Okay? And since I've got them here, and I didn't give you all the warning you would have liked to have had about the questioning, I'll just kind of read and make sure I'm not off on anything. But because of the homestead exemption that this council passed last year and was approved by the voters last year, tax cuts, in addition to the $100,000 from the shift of the millage rate, there's $300,000
Correct.
of additional tax relief. So that's $400,000 worth of tax relief in this budget already from those two things alone, in addition to the changes that we made to the senior homestead exemption, which saves seniors over 65 years old an additional $60,000.
Correct.
So that's $460,000 in a really difficult budget year of tax relief to our taxpayers in this budget already. And just for the public and for fellow council members to know, I took very seriously the discussions we've had about leaving us tremendous flexibility in an unstable environment to make sure that we did. And I've been on council for 8 years now. I've never seen a budget with so few operating initiatives, and because that's how we generally get a lot of things done. But I was very thoughtful in putting on what I did put in there. And the only 3 items I put in is operating initiatives. And the reason they're called operating initiatives are those items that aren't just budget items this year. They generally obligate you for future years, okay? We'll talk about capital items later. Capital items are generally one-time commitments. But the only 3 things I recommended from operating initiatives was the potential of paying our city employees the merit pay increases that they would typically get next March, probably paid out in April, I would assume. So that was $250,000. Of course, that would obligate future payroll costs in the future. If we paid it in this fiscal year budget, it would certainly be expected in future years as well. That's why it's called an operating initiative. Second one I recommended was help desk software, because we're having a lot of people working remotely, and our IT department is working with an outdated software system. The total cost of that is $26,000, and one of the reasons I recommended it is we're paying $8,000 for an outdated system that's not working, so it's a net cost of $18,000. And the third item that I recommended was the new Preston Ridge Community Center, because if you haven't heard, we're opening a community center off of North Point Parkway over at the Y facility, a joint project with them, and we have to have money to operate that new facility. It's going to be opening very soon. So that was a $40,000 net commitment on that as well. And actually, we expect revenues to net out most of that, if not all of that as well. So the net cost of those were the potential raises for next year and $18,000 net for the software. So I was very thoughtful in that. I know we've had discussions, and that's not all that council will want to spend, and that's okay. We'll have discussions now and in future meetings about what changes we may want to make. But I made these recommendations based on the fact that we want to have flexibility. We want to be cognizant of the fact that despite $19.3 million in reserves, we still might have some very difficult decisions ahead of ourselves. And that's why we came out with the budget that we have. I know one of the other discussion points that had come up specifically last week, but I've had conversations with council members about this for several weeks, was compensation. And so I want to address that at this time. When we passed the budget a year ago, we began these discussions in June of last year. The budget we're currently operating under had budgeted for a payroll increase, as we always do when money's available, of a maximum of 3% of the salaries. And so we budgeted that during this fiscal year. When we got around to giving those, because we have assessments early in the year and then we make those payroll decisions, we had already started being impacted by the COVID virus. At that time, our leadership came to me. It wasn't something that council brought to them. Leadership, being city manager or city administrator Bob Regas, Tom Harris, came to me and said, look, we don't know what's coming. This was, before we'd even shut down legally and all that stuff, we just knew what was coming. We knew there were cases. We knew there was going to be dramatic impact. They said that in 2008, when the economy bottomed out, they took steps at that point to postpone those raises to prevent having to do layoffs or something like that at some point. Because when you don't know what's coming, you prepare for the worst. We took the recommendation. We did not allot those raises. Those raises would have been paid in April, and it would have been $250,000 for that portion between April and the end of June. And it would have been $750,000 for the fiscal year budget that we're talking about right now. So that's $1 million of the reserves that we now have that would have been spent had we not taken that extraordinary measure. And it was the right thing to do. I'm glad we did it. And our fellow employees, to their credit, did not really push back. I didn't get a lot of negative comments. They understood that under those circumstances back then, we didn't know what was coming, and we were trying to batten the hatches for everybody's sake. We're in a different place now. We have some pretty good, solid information. We'll know more in a few months. But based on that, I know there were some concerns from council that we still don't have tremendous insight into what the real revenues are going to be over the next fiscal year. So I asked Bob, city administrator, last week after we had some of those questions. I said, Bob, did any of the other cities in North Fulton withhold pay increases to their employees in this fiscal year? And the answer is no. Not a single other city in North Fulton has done that. To my knowledge, nobody else in Fulton County has. I didn't ask Bob to go check with all of them. But the point being that some cities pay their payroll increases early in the fiscal year because you know you got lots of money 11 months ago or 10 months ago. But when you wait until the end of the year like we do, it provides cover for bad years like we have, and it gives management and the elected officials that flexibility in a tremendously bad year like we had, and we'd made good choice. But the fact is that $1 million that was committed to our employees last June and July was not paid. And so when I look at the projections that I'm being given, there's substantial revenue decreases, but there's nothing that scares me. There's no information, no data that says that the projection Tom Harris, a man with decades of experience doing this, that we won't be able to make good on our promises to those employees. But that being said, I was still sympathetic to the concerns of council and my own, that paying that raise now still commits us for a year from now and 2 years from now, and that's still not a clear future, okay? And so what I thought would be a good compromise to give the least impact, negative impact to our employees, was to go ahead and pay, instead of giving a payroll increase that obligates future revenues for future years, do it much like they did in 2008, a one-time bonus. We'll call it a bonus because it's not something that'll be taxed as regular income and it obligates future years, councils, and things like that. That way, we almost make our employees whole for this year, but it gives us more flexibility for next year. And in the meantime, we have had compensation studies done that showed our public employee compensation plan needed revisions. It's been a process that's taken us almost 2 years to go through, but that information has recently come to us, making recommendations, which we anticipated, of another 600, well, there's various price tags from, I believe, 2.4 million down to 200, 300,000, okay. So based on those options, I thought since we're not giving the raises that we promised, we'll give our employees a bonus of almost equal and commit to making those payroll compensation changes that'll make us stronger and more equitable in the future. And the price tag of that was $620,000 is what's projected for this initial phase of getting that done. Those were the recommendations I made, and those are discussions we'll have, and we'll see where council falls. But I was very thoughtful in the way I put these recommendations together. I think I've had some discussions with some people who would prefer to, unfortunately, we didn't get the compensation study to our council members in a timely manner. They haven't had time to review it. It's a fairly extensive study and very detailed. And I think it is fair that they have more time to digest the recommendations in there. But the fact is, we've committed for a year to pay those increases. Every city around us paid those increases. And I think to not pay those increases without hard evidence that we can't afford to is just not good policy. Half of our employees are public safety employees. We've known about issues within public safety compensation for years. They're always going to be a major portion of our payroll, but every person that works in this city has an important role or they wouldn't work for the city. And so I think it's unfair unless we have very clear evidence that we would have to make drastic cuts outside of what's already being projected and what we're seeing around us, not to be able to make our employees as whole as we possibly can. So with that being said, I'll go ahead and turn it over. Tom, were there any other items you wanted to bring up?
No, just open for questions.
Okay. Do we have any questions from council? Councilman Burnett?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My question is, Tom, what is the increase in the overall budget from 2020 to 2021? And while you're looking that up, I'll say this. I know that the city of Roswell, they were inferred earlier, so year over year, I know that they are decreasing their budget from what I heard today, from what was printed in the paper, to the tune of $9.5 million. That's not the same city,
Right.
but that's not an increase either. So what's our budget increase year over year?
I want to answer it properly, because when they tell you that number, their budget may have went up because of fund balance and a lot. That's included in the budget. It's not just what's your revenue impacts. So we're showing the budget about a 1.1% change in operating revenues from budget to budget, down. So we are decreasing on the revenue side. Problem we get into is we carry over fund balance from the years before that could be greater than the year before, and it creates a mismatch in your budget on how much you're up or down. So I'm trying to break it down into what the apples and apples I think you're trying to compare it to. But pre-COVID to COVID, we've cut $8.8 million out of the budget.
Second question. We pulled between $4 and $5 million of capital projects from the 2020 budget and rolled them into 2021 to make up some sort of delta that we could argue and fight about later. Are those rolled into the operating expenses for the most part, just to cover the nuts and bolts of city government today? How did those funds get allocated in this budget?
We freed up funds, put a halt to a lot of the projects that I think we said, hey, they don't need to go forward. That provided a funding source to carry out, I think, $8.5 million of capital projects that we're doing in next year. But it freed up, we didn't need to make a transfer that we normally make, about $5 million for recurring capital. And now that has been reduced basically to $189,000. So we have cut that by to $5 million. That pretty much, along with the other cuts, is how we came up with the 8.5. But a big chunk of it is not funding the recurring as a line item in the operating budget, because when these things happen, and it's pretty common, I think most cities around us are doing the same thing, is can you hold the line for a little bit and fund a lot of the recurring stuff with cash that you have available on hand, and not go drastically into the budgets and cut everything as you're trying to manage this process.
How, we can assume that all good times come to an end for a portion or maybe an extended period of time. How many months worth of lost revenue or sales tax revenue have you seen since COVID began? And how does that trend, and have you seen it start to tick up yet?
No, it's gotten a little worse, but we just finished April sales, and the May payment to us was down from the year before 30%.
So it's 45 days real time behind.
Right, we're
June.
yeah.
Okay.
You always you paid at the end of the month for the month before.
So we will know June's numbers in August.
Correct. End of August.
Okay. I'll yield the floor, Mayor. Thank you.
Councilman Hypes, I believe you were next, and Councilman Binder, I think I saw you next after.
I believe you said this was going to be a question time for Mr. Harris. I have a proposed changes to the budget, but I'll defer until that point in time unless you want to take it up now.
I'd prefer for us to ask questions first, and I appreciate you bringing that up. You know, everybody on this dais has the right to make a motion. Just to keep things kind of organized and clear, if we can discuss additions or subtractions individually, I think it'll be easier for us as individuals and the public to follow that discussion if there's change. But like I said, everybody has the right to make a motion, so I just suggest that we try to do it in an orderly fashion like that so it doesn't get too complicated. Councilman Binder, any questions?
Yes, Tom, couple things. So I missed that the T-Splosh to Windward project, that was, it was estimated at 4, what did we save?
They're now 1.6 and 1.5 respectively, so a little over 3.
We saved a mill.
And I think we saved at least $1 million, yeah.
And then T-Splosh is funded through the sales tax. And so
Correct.
just like
Correct.
our law,
Sorry,
It may be,
Pete, I just want to make sure that these are the latest numbers, because I had spoken to Pete earlier today, and those weren't the numbers
Right.
that I...
the floor.
The apparent low bidder is around $2.134 million. Of that dollar amount, approximately $300,000, we believe, is due to us from the developer across the street who had a zoning condition. So deduct that, you get right around your $1.8 million from that subtraction of that 300. We still have to procure that $300,000 from that zoning condition. The Windward Mill project was required to build a westbound, a third leg of the westbound lane between North Point Parkway and Georgia 400. So we pull that separate from
So the low end bidder or the awarded
the
bidder?
low. June 15th, I'll be bringing the item forward to Mayor.
So it's the low end.
It's the
not
apparent
awarded.
bidder.
so this was good on May 21st.
So, and then overall on T-Splosh, how short are we?
Well, prior to that adjustment, about 13.3 million.
13.3 million whole prior to,
The adjustment that I had at about 3.1 million,
and then
that
we're
he's now saying is
looking at
1.8, so.
and we're looking at decreased sales tax revenue coming in to what we expected before,
But
just
that's-
because of the COVID.
Yes, but I'm projecting that in the $13 million
Okay.
number.
Oh, good.
It was projecting a decrease of about 20% for the remaining 24 months that we were getting T-Splosh numbers.
Okay.
It's
And
pretty
then
conservative, I think, over the long run.
that, what was it, 16 million in emergency funds or that reserve, that,
Yeah, 15, 16, yeah.
when are we allowed to use that?
Yeah,
Was it-
it's a balance you try to maintain. You try to say it's there for eternity. Obviously, when you're hit with something and you're not able to adjust right away, you could dip into it. As long as you have a plan to get out of it, it's not going to immediately cause an issue with the rating agencies or something. And I don't think even the mayor's suggesting that we would be going into it, but it is there as I guess the whole point is budgets aren't static. Just because you approve a budget, we're going to be looking along the way to say, hey, are we going to dip into that 4.1? Oh, and we're going to go beyond that. We're going to need to make cuts. Then obviously we would make cuts.
The 4 point, and that's because you trained me well. That 15 and a half, that's not really a fire alarm or use. It's more of a parachute. Like last when it's needed, and you really don't want us to use it because that could affect our AAA rating.
Yeah,
So
don't
it's
necessarily make.
so we're
decisions.
trying to play with the 4 point, right?
Correct.
Okay. And then a little bit on the personnel. And I totally agree. I think we got to make our employees whole. I think a spot bonus is good. May even consider, they deserve their metrics, so they get it year over year. I know how important that is with the growth. But as far as what's going in, it's increased a little bit with the personnel, right? The personnel dollars, the cost on the general fund. I'm probably looking at page 58.
Right.
So it's increased by 2.1%, and then you have a note on the bottom that we're doing a hiring freeze at 6.5 people, so we're less than 6.5 people.
That's correct.
That will eventually probably have to get hired within the next year or two, I would assume, or 3, or just based on what they have, but there's some important people, like people that help out with treasury, people that help out with public works, those kind of things. So I assume they would come back in. But even with those 6.5 people gone, we still raise it at 2.1%.
That's correct.
Okay. And then Milton, we all know, is pulling out their ladder truck, and then we got to bring in, I guess what we're calling a quint to replace that ladder truck. And then, so when we bring that on, and we're going to have to bring that on, that's going to be an additional cost of how much?
700,000
On an annual basis?
on an annual basis.
Okay. And that's not in here right now because that wasn't recommended. Right?
Correct.
Okay. That's it.
Any other questions from council? Any other discussion?
Time appropriate, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make two proposed changes by way of separate motions to the proposed budget. And my first motion
Now,
is...
just as a matter of policy, I need to, before we make a motion, I need to have Sam read and go to the public, correct, Sam?
That's correct.
Yeah. Sorry.
They don't want to hear what I have to say, the public.
Well, we have to go to the public before we can make motions. Well, I guess you can make a motion, but I would recommend that we go to the public first because we can't skip the public portion.
Yes, and we actually have two items that will be considered for adoption. One, of course, is the millage rate, and the other is the actual budget. So I'll read the title of the budget ordinance. An ordinance of the Mayor and Council of the City of Alpharetta, Georgia, adopting the final estimates of revenue and expenditures for the fiscal year commencing July 1, 2020, and ending on June 30, 2021, as its annual budget, appropriating the use of funds shown therein as may be needed or deemed necessary to defray all expenditures and liabilities of the city for such fiscal year, providing an effective date and for other purposes. And the other matter that will be considered and is open for discussion by the public is an ordinance of the Mayor and Council of the City of Alpharetta, Georgia, to fix the ad valorem tax rate of the City of Alpharetta for the fiscal year commencing July 1, 2020, and ending June 30, 2021, and for other purposes.
Thanks, sir. Sorry for the confusion, Councilman Hypes. We could have discussed it, I just didn't want to entertain a motion before we had an opportunity to hear from the public first. That being said, Ms. Cobb, do we have any public comment cards on this item?
We do not, sir.
But if there's anyone here that would like to come forward and speak on fiscal year 2021 budget, now's your chance to come forward and speak. Seeing no one, we'll close public comment. So now, if we want to have a discussion or entertain a motion, is the opportunity to do so. Councilman Hypes?
So, did you ask for a motion?
No, I'm just saying, if we want to have discussions about individual items before we have a motion, we can do that.
Okay.
Or if somebody makes a motion, I have to entertain it.
I would make a motion then, Mr. Mayor. I would offer a motion to approve the budget as presented this evening for the fiscal year 2020, 2021, as presented by the mayor and read by the city attorney.
I would second the motion, but I would like to offer an amendment.
Okay.
Actually, I'd like to offer two amendments. The first amendment is to move the quint apparatus, it's noted on page 19 of the proposed budget, and move it into unallocated designated reserve coming out of the 4.1 million non-allocated reserve.
I accept that.
And what was that dollar number? I'm sorry, I didn't have
That's
that.
$300,000.
Okay.
The second offered amendment is to move $20,000 for the flock LPR cameras, and for those with your budget books in front of you, that is at the top of page 42. These items were previously discussed at the workshop, and to likewise move that into unallocated reserve to come out of the $4.1 million. And those would be my proposed amendments.
I would accept both of those.
Okay, we have a motion and a second.
If I could just make one clarity.
Yes, please.
Okay, I just want to make sure on the flock 20,000, that is a capital initiative. So
Coming out of the wrong bucket?
it could come out of the capital bucket, the $1 million, I think a little bit over $1 million that we have in unallocated capital.
So this is the
That would be-
flock, 20,000?
Yeah, it's a piece of, it's, as he mentioned, on the top of 42, it's.
No, I know what the item is. I just wanted to make sure I
Correct.
understood you correctly, that it's the $20,000 flock LPR
Correct.
would come out of
Got it.
unallocated capital rather than,
Operations, unallocated, correct.
Okay. Is everybody clear on that?
That is what I intended to say, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Harris, Director Harris. Okay, so the motion that we've got right now is to approve as read with the changes of the $300,000 Quint Reserve, which is operations, and the $20,000 unallocated capital reserve for the flock LPR. Any discussion? Councilman Binder?
Appreciate all the work that's been put into this by staff and you, sir, and definitely it's not easy. There's no playbooks out there. I've had a concern from the beginning on the revenues. I think we're a little too Pollyannish on the revenues, especially the sensitive ones on our sales tax, and seeing what other cities are doing, closer to 20 to 28% reduction off the 2019 actuals. I do know that Tom and finance staff's done a fantastic job of having that 4.1 reserves to protect us on that. I just would feel more comfortable us being more in line with other cities on those revenue projections for sensitive tax receipts. On the expenditures, the personnel service, I'm glad to serve with y'all. I know we're all on the same page that we want to take care of our staff. We got a top-notch staff at all levels. And so want to make sure they're made whole on what was promised to them the last fiscal year. I want to make sure that we bring in what we need to bring in line to make sure we have top-notch service like our fire response and stay at top tier on that. I want to make sure we're on the market in there, and if we can, have a merit bonus and see how that all goes in there. I just would feel more comfortable that once we get the tax digest in August, we have that conversation. I'd feel more comfortable as a council that we have always been a data-driven council, and for us to make a decision on a comp plan where we've only received a draft form and not the final report, I think it's okay to wait a month or two until we get it, and let's just talk about it whole, of how we're going to add to this government where we need to, how we're going to take care of our employees, which we're all 100% behind you on that. So with that, I'm going to offer a substitute motion, and I'm going to try to keep it all in line so everybody understands on the page by following through. But on page 58, I'll start off with the revenues. To keep us in line with other cities that are 20 to 28% reduction, I'm going to offer a 20% reduction off of the 2009 actuals, which would be a $2,220,543 reduction off of the loss.
I'm sorry, what was that number again?
$2,220,543. $2,220,543 off of the local option sales tax, which would put us at a 20% from the 2019 actuals. On the expenditures, on the personnel side, I will hold that flat right now. And on maintenance, and then also have it on page 70. If you would turn to page.
So that was just flat for personnel expenditures.
Correct. And then on page 70 is under the second bullet point, the implementation of the Evergreen Class and Compensation Study findings totaling $620,000 annually upon council approval. And then number 3 on maintenance and operations, going back to page 58, that we reduce that overall by $397,309.
Absolutely crazy. Unheard of. Can you repeat that?
Page 70, where it talks about the compensation study, that at the end of that line where it says implementation of evergreen class and compensation study findings totaling $620,000 annually upon council approval. On maintenance and operations, back to page 58, that it's a reduction, further reduction of $397,309. And then capital initiative changes. Sidewalk maintenance and repair, which is on page 26, reduced by $50,000. Storm and drainage maintenance, reduced by $30,000. That's on page 31. Again, on page 31, stormwater inspections, reduced by $10,000. Greenway repair and maintenance on page 30, $100,000. Parks repairs, reduced by $20,000 on page 30. Page 30, park enhancements, reduced by $30,000. And then on page 33, public arts programs, reduced by $12,500. And then increasing, bringing back into the budget, historic preservation, the Stories Project on page 43, adding $12,500 to that. And then finally, on page 42, the flock license plate reader, add $20,000, which that is a reduction of $252,500 and an addition of $32,500, and then for a net of $220,000. So that's my end of motion.
Second.
We have a motion by Councilman Binder, a second by Councilman Burnett. Aaron, did you get the details of that? Okay, good.
Discussion?
Urkel?
Yeah, I would. We talk about a council working together. I've never heard a single one of these, Jason. Here we are at the first reading. We've had these numbers for quite a while to work with. We've not seen emails. If we can't meet together, I've not seen a single email, a single text saying, hey, what do you think? Do you have any ideas or inputs of where we should do this? I find it very rogue. The statement you made that says we don't have a playbook. I got two all-time coaches of all time that understand this, that have been through the 2008, 2009 crash between Mr. Harris, Mr. Regis, James, and the head of this staff. So the proposal you're making, to me, and having gone through this budget multiple times with Mr. Harris, is throwing darts at it. Hey, we'll take money out of here, take money out of here, take money out of there. What you're proposing right here is going to affect a lot of people's lives that work in this city. We don't cut that kind of money without letting people go. I promise you that it's going to have to happen. There's just way too many. This whole cut 10%, 20% here, I don't care what Roswell does. If Roswell's been mismanaged up to this point, maybe it's time they got it fixed. But this city and this council has not been mismanaged up to this point. We've done a great job. I'm not Pollyanna or whatever you said earlier that where everything's going to get great, but I'm in this downtown area 5-6 times a week, and I'm telling you, people are back. We're going to pick up our property taxes. Thank God that a millage rate increase did not happen, or the homestead exemption increase did not happen that was proposed prior to this, or we'd really be in trouble now. So follow the professionals that have run major cities, have more experience than you could ever touch, and give it a shot because they know what they're doing. And then you add a $15.1 million emergency backstop if it doesn't work. I'm very comfortable with the way this budget's been presented. I'm very proud of the mayor, the way he put it together, and there's no way I'm standing behind what was just presented here tonight. Not the second one.
Councilman Hype?
Well, we have had our share of discussions behind the scenes, and while I hadn't heard many of those numbers, I have had discussions with Jason about his philosophy, certainly, about the budget, and I heard his concerns and acknowledged some of those concerns about the sales tax revenue, and because we've got this book here, 160 pages of material that's been put together for us to study and analyze and ask questions about and test our own theories. I was on the phone today talking with Director Harris and asking the question that's been raised: if other cities who derive their sales tax from Fulton County are down 25%, and our actuals last year were 17,400,000, and we're down 7%. I said, what gives? But the answer is, if you do a 25% reduction off of last year's actuals of 17,400,000, we'd be right around 13 million in terms of where our budget should be at the 25% reduction. But the way the balance sheet is set up is down in the 4.1 million is where that difference is. The difference between the 15.7 and the 13 million, which is roughly about $2.7 million, is down in the 4.1 million. So to state it differently, the budget that we have does reflect 25% decrease in sales tax revenue. If you take out that money, we've got a 25% decrease reflecting very conservative numbers, reflective of surrounding jurisdictions, but then we've got a $1.45 million reserve down below. I asked Director Harris, I said, in an ordinary year, how much do we have in that reserve number? And the answer is zero. We have a contingency number, which is also included in here, 700,000. So the fact of the matter is, only because of an accounting function, the 25% decrease in sales tax is reflected by the numbers on our page 58. It's a matter of semantics whether or not you reduce the revenue figure or you increase the reserve figure. It's just the dollars are reflected there. So that gave me a lot of peace about revenue projections, and also acknowledges the legitimate concerns that other council members were raising. I appreciate everybody's passion. I have absolutely no clue how I can do my sworn duty to vote on a budget for a year based off numbers I just heard. I've been studying this thing for weeks. I've been asking questions on this budget that's in here for weeks. And it would be, in my estimation, irresponsible to just take numbers that I've heard, and I couldn't keep up with writing them down, let alone analyzing them. So, the orderly process of getting to a budget that is validated by our professionals and Mr. Regas, I've expressed my concerns about the budget with the mayor. We had a long discussion this morning, but in each situation we had an opportunity to go to a page, look at a number, and talk about it. I don't have that, I can't possibly do that right now. And for those reasons, I would, there's a substitute motion, and I can't support that substitute motion. I think the premise behind it is not properly founded on the big revenue projection number. And aside from that, all the changes, I'm at a loss for words.
Any other comments from council? Councilman Burnett?
I just want to thank both of y'all for being respectful and disagreeing. My biggest concern with the budget all along is when you have cities that are looking at making drastic cuts and we are doing nothing. There's no downside if the millage rate stays the same to have more money in unallocated capital. We can put $10,000 back into stormwater. We can put $20,000 back into a park. I'd be more than happy to accept a friendly amendment for a quint to get started on purchasing that. I think that those are all great things. But when we rolled money from the $4 million that we all agreed was the right thing to do and took those projects from our residents, I struggle with the fact that we use that money as a further buffer just to give people a bonus or a pay raise. Bureau of Labor and Statistics are going to put job numbers out Friday. If 14.7% of this country is out of work today, I'm willing to think that there's a puncher's chance that that's going to go up a little bit. It's 1.5 out of every 10 homes has somebody in it. That's struggling. I also think when the assessments come out, you're going to have a mountain of commercial properties that are crying poor. And I think they're going to be, and they've got all the resources in the world to go appeal property tax assessments that regular residents, have a hard time getting educated on how to make that work. I'm sympathetic that I do think that the residential portion of the tax digest is probably going to show the 3% increase that it is, because that was the assessed value on January 1st. I'm willing to be wrong, but I'm also willing to, I don't see a downside by choosing to reduce some of the expenses, because you can always come back down the road, and every opportunity I've had to support our staff from a financial perspective, I've taken. We all have. There are different ways to get there, and I am amenable to those. I sent Bob an email last week and said, I think we operate for our individual contributors on a 37.5-hour work week. It might make a difference to them if we would change that to 40. That's a real thing. If you're making $16 an hour at 37.5, that's $31,000. If you're making $16 an hour, 40 hours a week at 52 weeks a year, you're getting a $2,500 raise just based on your work week being elongated. I'm in favor of all of those things, and I'm sure that there are things that we can sit here and iron out in the next couple of weeks, but I've talked to Councilmember Hypes last week. Y'all didn't call me. So, you don't like it, sorry. That's a you problem. Thank you.
Any other discussion from council? Councilwoman Richard?
I think we're having some really great dialogue here. I think it's something that is necessary. I have spent a lot of time on the budget, asked a lot of questions, spoke with the mayor this afternoon, spoke with Councilmember Hypes, spoke with other members on council in regards to a number of the, the revenue projections. I am of the same mind. I think we are a little, I'd like to see more conservative numbers. I really would. And I understand that we see some folks back out in downtown Alpharetta, but I also hear and see in my own family what's happening in the private sector and what type of job cuts and pay cuts have been taken since the beginning of March. I mean, my son, who was employed, last year as he graduated, is working for a global company of 9,000 people. They took a pay cut this third week of March across the board. We have not had to enact any kind of a pay cut, and I am grateful for Bob's management that we were able to keep all of our employees employed during COVID, and that all of our employees, no one took a pay cut. We had 30-odd folks on paid administrative leave, and no, we didn't have to make any changes to our benefits, and I feel very grateful that we were able to weather that. And I hope that we can continue to not have furloughs and keep our folks employed and look at the compensation. But I am not comfortable in supporting the $1 million bonus that is being proposed in the mayor's budget right now. And I am sympathetic to the fact that this is it's compensating in a way for a merit raise that wasn't received, and the rest of the North Fulton cities, because of timing, received it. And that, it stinks that our guys are getting paid their merit at the end of April or the end of March. That's unfortunate, but I can't not pay attention to what is happening in this country. And like you said, the unemployment numbers are going through the roof. I know people in Alpharetta who have businesses who have had to close down. 13 years of having a business in our city, they're closed down. Relatives of mine are no longer working in positions that they've had for many years. So this is a very unique time, and I think that we as a council need to be very cognizant of that. And I hate to use this word optics about having $1 million bonus being paid when we don't know where the bottom of the, are we going into we're in a recession, we're going into a depression, we don't know. And the optics of putting that in the budget right now, to me, is troublesome. And it's something that is, I'm not able to support. And I appreciate the discussion about the operation cuts that are being proposed right now. And I would say that as a council, because of COVID, perhaps, we've not had the type of dialogue that we typically have on the budget and the mayor's proposed budget. I mean, we've sat in council meetings and have gone through this, in previous years, and have made, I think, good decisions. We've collectively collaborated on it, and so I guess I'm voicing my unsupport for the mayor's proposed budget, but I would also be interested in perhaps tabling this and coming back next week and having some more opportunity for folks to get more comfortable about what the substitute motion was. Those are my comments.
Councilman Himes?
Without getting into tabling, I find my sentiments very similar to Councilwoman Richards' sentiments. I see two different issues here that I'm confronted with. One is, are the revenue projections off such that cuts other than the payroll issue need to be made in the manner that I had just heard? And I would welcome Director Harris to explain how it is that his budget actually reflects sales tax decrease of 25% just by making a simple book entry adjustment from the reserve down below. But before I get to that, I am also more comfortable in terms of where the allocation of expenditures are once the revenue situation is fully explained, and how it does reflect and how we are commensurate with surrounding jurisdictions. I'm more comfortable working with what I know on are the expenditures here, as opposed to what Councilman Binder had proposed, because I was not keeping up with that. Back to Councilmember Richard, I'm open to compromise on a motion. I know there's one pending, but I'm open to compromise in the sense of, doing some or all of the one-time quote bonus payment, maybe even 50%, but then having an allocated reserve for the compensation. And then many of you who I have spoken with, I've used the analogy, let's go into the locker room at halftime of this fiscal year, and if we're doing okay, we'll be glad to start releasing money. But if if the economy and the return of the coronavirus in the fall, if that were to happen, and we are confronting a whole different reality, then we would have that in an allocated reserve, in addition to the other reserves. I know the 15 million, but you made your points on that. But I think there's a middle measure where I still have a degree of certainty about what we're doing with a budget that's been heavily studied and addressing this compensation issue and getting comfortable with the revenue, which I believe is properly reflected in this budget. But I invite Director Harris to come up and explain it in either accounting or layperson terms. Because you walked me through it on page 58, so.
Yes, on page 58, and I think you actually did a pretty good job at it earlier, saying, you got to remember, I'm not saying we're ahead of everybody else, but in January, February, we already pretty much have an estimate of what our revenues are going to be for the new year. And we're building a budget. And then we get hit with COVID and we start backing things out. We had $1 million plus of new initiatives beyond. We had $800,000 going to be set aside for a bond or debt service or something because of some other millage, the swap. All kinds of things got removed from the budget to deal with an $8-something million decrease in revenues. That's what happened. But getting to that point specifically, we then started saying, okay, I can't keep up with trying to make sure you guys focus on what are the issues of operating initiatives. What are the issues that are going to grow the budget? And I'm not going to get into, it probably could have been a mistake, going in and changing local option sales tax in those weeks things were flying fast. So instead, we just put a number down below. So our budget has a expenditure line, it's a reserve, see it as a minus to the revenues. It's not there to pay anything, it's not there to cover anything. Our intent when I built it was to cover revenue shortfall. So if, for example, if you want to say local option sales tax is going to be down 25%, then the best way to look at it is what do you think it's going to be down pre-COVID to post-COVID? I don't want to tell somebody what they thought last year was. What were we running at? How much impact are people going to have? If you took it to, we were generating $17.4 million. That's the pace we were running at. And we said, hey, the future is that's going to be 75%.
That's
Right?
13,050,000.
13 million. And in fact, well, I don't want to get into it. It's down 30% in one of the worst months ever without any kind of recovery at all because everything was closed. So we could argue whether it would stay at 30 or would it really come off that a little bit. So if you took that out and you said, okay, I've got to be truth in budgeting. I need to slash that line and take out, make sure I take out 2.65 million and bring that number from 15.7 to $13,005,000. I would go down and slash that reserve from 4.1, take out 2.65 and be left with $1.45 million balance.
And how much was the reserve last year?
Zero.
That's, yes. So the budget reflects the 25% drop.
In our opinion, it does. Could it be better reflected so we'd all maybe, we were moving fast, we were saying all along, that's it. The discussion then comes down to what are we growing the budget by? What is it growing by? Because we've made cuts. I don't want to get in all of it. There was 600 to 800,000 just made after post-COVID in line items of departments. And again, and we removed additional capital stuff, and like I said, we reduced that recurring capital. That's a fact. We did take it from a $5 million funding level down to 189,000. That's a fact, but that's not an unreasonable move before you cut everything when these revenues could come back in a few years and we can start building up our recurring again. We could start doing that. So that was the same process that was actually used years ago. Not to that magnitude, but it was used in the past to reduce capital. But what are we growing by? The one-time money is not growing your budget, as the mayor mentioned. It is being paid for by fund balance. You can argue whether it's good, bad, or right, or indifferent, but it doesn't. We could wait to this theoretically and study every revenue from here through the rest of the year. Won't matter whether you decide do you want to take $1 million out of the pocket, out of leftover savings, and pay it because there's some strong arguments that people weren't funded. And again, theoretically, that is where you would say most corporations, most people would do. I'd rather not grow the budget if you believe that somebody's behind or I need to hold them over. So that doesn't necessarily grow the budget. It was $936,000 in there for that. But the mayor mentioned his operating initiatives were $276,000, I think. That grows the budget. But one of which is an April date, so we have time to decide whether that merit program could still survive after, when we get to December. And then he does have, in the operating budgets of the departments, up in that salary line is $620,000 for the class and comp. And that approval process, you guys got to decide what that approval, because the document will come before you, and there'll be some sort of approval process in that. So hopefully that makes some sense of where
To conclude my time, and thank you, Director Harris, much like Councilmember Richard said, I can be supportive of a 50% of the bonus payment up front and doing a designated reserve for the balance of the compensation, but going back to the expenditures that are here, because I've studied these expenditures. That's what I can be comfortable with.
Before you go, I get a chance to. Tom, if you could, one of the things that troubles me about this motion is you've prepared a very thoughtful and detailed budget of pages and pages of specific items that are budgeted to be done. And the motion simply takes arbitrary numbers and cuts without identifying which programs would be cut. So if this motion were to pass, how would our staff know where those monies were coming from?
they would not. It sounds like we have a $397,309 cut to M&O. So then we would have to work with them, and like I said, we've.
I mean, can we legally pass a budget without identifying where it's going?
Probably not a wise thing to do, because the departments won't know where to cut it, and they may not actually control it at that point if I put it in as a.
Well, maybe that's a Sam, can we just quote numbers without identifying where those cuts are coming from or where the money that's left will be spent?
Well, I think that what we adopt is a budget that complies with state law and also complies with the accounting principles that relate to local government. And no, I think you do need to include specifics for it to be validly enacted. And that means you need to know where the money's coming from, rather than just kind of leave it up in the air.
So you think if we vote on the motion as read and it's approved, that would not withstand legal challenge?
That we would look at possibly in a second reading or
We would,
something like
yeah,
that.
we would at least have to know by department, because the legal level of control
Right.
that is adopted in the budget is by
And
department. So
perhaps we could do that by department by the next reading or something, but
Okay.
this alone probably would not be an effective budget.
That's a good point. It's by
Okay.
department.
Thank you. Councilman Binder?
One important point that I want to bring in, this what's always kind of concerned me, is we got to deal with multiple levels and operations to make sure that we can function as a government. Our personnel to take care of our top-notch staff, which I think we can get there once we get the final report and see our tax digest numbers fairly shortly, what we want to do holistically, and then our capital projects. But this unallocated reserve, it got funded by $5 million of capital projects. And the way I can talk about it in layman's terms, that's $5 million of our quality of life improvements. So things like our web bridge corridor that we've been talking about, it's going to have to hold. Are things like other projects that we've been discussing for a while, and that makes sense. That makes sense. But when something, it seems pretty confident when everybody else is saying that we're going to reduce our sales tax revenue by that much, I'm okay with kind of putting that there as an assumption. So I think it's important to say, when we say we're going to take from 4.2 million, that's from our quality of life improvements. In regards to the departments, that 397, 309, I can say where I took it, and I'd be happy for us to work over the next week with staff to say where they think they can take it from. But it wasn't in the budget. I had to go into the open checkbook to get the details at the line item level of where everything was coming, because it kind of rolls into a mid-level mid-level figure for us at this budget document. So recreation and parks, I noticed that events, it stayed flat in an area where we're cutting events. So $253,759 from that. General government, $30,750.
Just to clarify, are you changing your motion, or are you just stating these facts?
And then legal is 100,000. And then a mayor and council budget, I think that we take it, we need to look into it and reduce that by 12,800. And so that at least gives you the department level that you need for a legal standing as clarification. I'd be happy to use that in the comments, or we can add that to a motion.
So what are you doing?
I think we're just still in comments right now.
On a motion? But I mean, if you're going to change the motion.
If Sam, that's enough for the comments, having that amount by department, or if we need to change the motion, you let us know. I would defer to staff.
Well, I mean, now that we're mentioning the departments, I mean, that's a good first step. So, I mean, you could probably go with your motion, but it'll still need to be sharpened and more specific by the time you have a second reading.
Correct.
Would you agree?
Absolutely.
And that would include the personnel too, because we're mentioning something, keep it flat, and we can do that on a number, but then it goes across departments and everything else. We just got to hone in on what was the intent there is to, and if I could just say some numbers to keep it flat. There's two things that are in that budget that seem to be a discussion on personnel. There's the $936,000 paid for by fund balance, but it's in a line, it's increasing the personnel cost, salaries. And then there's the class and comp of 620. If you look on page 58, that gives us $1,556,000 of things we could, let's just for entertainment, remove that out. We had $970,000 increase. So we took out $1,556,000, we had $970,000, we'd have $586,000 to keep it flat. So are we saying the 586 would be, use it for the class and comp, but the class and comp, it's close to 620, by the way, 586, 620. Keep that in there for the class and comp, but it needs approval for the plan, and then $1 million comes out above, goes down below as down into non-allocated reserve, or a reserve for compensation, whatever, so it doesn't get tied up with the reserve necessarily for the million, for the revenues. So, don't know.
As proposed, the $1,997,000 or whatever it was from the salary would go out, and then that left enough for close to 600, which would be towards that classic comp. And what did stay is in that that reserve operating, all the mayor's operating initiatives did stay intact. It did not get increased by $1 million.
And you reduce the departments by $330,000. What do we do with that million fund balance we're carrying over? Do we put it as the $936,000 that we've basically removed from up above? It's coming from fund balance, which was under the mayor's intention to use it for one time. I just need a little direction on where you're, if your motion passes, I just want to know.
The revenue increased by $2,220,543. Portion of that salary reduction went to make up for what I feel is a more accurate revenue number. So that's where it went.
Yeah, the difficulty, I got to make sure, and this is.
And I got it right here.
Right here, you got to remember that $1 million cannot balance the budget. The $1 million that's coming from fund balance cannot balance the budget. What do you mean, Mr. Harris? It can be used for one-time stuff. It can't be used to balance the above-the-line stuff. It can come in and go. So if you remove giving the bonuses, but you still want to use the fund balance, I'm out $1 million. Can't do it. That make sense?
Yep.
So we're clear as mud.
I think I would like you to reflect the revenue shortfall in line with other cities.
Okay. I mean, we can move.
You can
I mean,
reduce,
depending on what people say, but I mean, it's not, I'd
And then
move one from another.
go further on the operations, and then the capital reductions. So, and then hold it flat, so.
Are you finished? Any other comments? Mayor Pro Tem Mitchell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is not easy for anybody, but I do not want to turn a deaf ear to all of our citizens and all the community that's suffering right now that can't even buy food. I was in line at Publix behind a lady. She didn't have money to pay for her groceries. She kept using her card over and over. The lady said, this is no lie, this is the environment we're living in right now. The lady said, ma'am, you've used your card 3 times. Do you want the food or not? And I'm not saying this to brag. I paid for her food, and you know what it was? I didn't even know how much it was. It was a bag of oranges and a bag of apples. That's all she could afford. I didn't know that's how, I thought she had substance or something, but this is where we're living right now. And I don't want to turn a deaf ear. We all voted on the pay compensation plan. We all voted to move forward with that because we all value our employees. We all think they need a raise. But to do it in this environment, I think is turning a deaf ear not only on our paying taxpayers, but on our public at large. And I just think it's real insensitive for us to even consider that. Now, July, August, yeah, if things are looking better, but we're looking at a 20% projection unemployment. Takes us back to the Great Depression. And if the third and fourth quarter, hopefully, we can all pray that it gets better, like some are projecting, but not all are projecting. We can reinstate a lot of this stuff, but I'm also not willing to cut every service for our citizens and be written up in the paper. Alpharetta, they're rich enough, they gave raises. They gave incentives to their employees. Instead of employees at our company, we haven't let one go. We've tried to keep them all employed, which is important to every single one of us. I was speaking with a commissioner this afternoon, and their sentiment was, we're asking for a tax allocation district at North Point Mall because our mall is in decline. And how insensitive is that going to look to the county commission to approve it when we've just given raises? There's a lot of things involved with this budget, but I can support being a lot more fiscally conservative right now than going too far at this moment, not having all the data that we need. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions from council? I've served on this council for over 8 years. I have never been more disappointed by this body than what I'm hearing tonight. And that's not that the intentions are something I question, or the goals are something I question. But I've served with some really brilliant minds. And over those 8 years, at no time have I ever seen so little respect for the professional staff of this city who have more than 50 years of budgeting for Fulton County, for other municipalities, and for this city that put this city where we are today. To have a document that took months and months of input from our staff, from our council, from professional people who run cities for a life, and take that document and arbitrarily change it without even having the courtesy to spend the time to identify where those cuts are coming from, or explain what data that we're supposed to be basing these decisions on. There's a motion on the floor and we'll vote on it, and that's fine. I got no problem with it. But this is really a poor statement of the professionalism of the people on this dais, including me, because I'm the mayor and I'm responsible for the mess that has been created here tonight. I have to think long and hard about how I managed to do that. But first of all, these are people who are professionals and have a damn good track record of explaining where their budget numbers come from and made it through budget cycles. We are people, I was a real estate agent. He's an interior designer. And we'll sit up here and tell these professionals that we're going to arbitrarily cut millions and millions of dollars, because when we looked at other press releases in other cities, we didn't feel comfortable with what our professional staff was recommending, and then did not have the courtesy to tell me about the cuts they were proposing instead, or to at least spend the time and the effort to identify where those cuts were supposed to be from, and just throw out something willy-nilly to our staff that throws people who are trying to keep this city running right now in times of stress and riots going on, and trying to protect this city from things going on out in the world that we don't really normally deal with, and yet we'll I'm sure that's to tell us there's a curfew in Atlanta. It happens every day lately. Sure enough. Good thing we're not in Atlanta. We'd have to leave in an hour. I'm just disappointed. We can have discussions about numbers and things like that, but to pull a motion like this on a $140+ million budget, that's a sad commentary on where we are as an organization right now. The rest of it we'll have to figure out, because just to throw out numbers without telling, these means there will be staff cuts. There's no way to cut this much money. As Councilman Merkel mentioned, there will be staff cuts, because you can't cut that kind of money without cutting programs or capital projects or other things to make it happen. So the employees who would have gotten a raise in March or April are now looking at instability from the leadership on this dais. So I won't support it. Hopefully in future discussions, this council will put something together that makes some sense of what is being proposed tonight, but I won't support it. I'll ask Councilman Binder to read his motion so that it can actually be read into the record for whatever we're voting on.
Motion to approve the recommended fiscal 2021 budget and adopt the fiscal year 2021 millage rate ordinance, first reading, and adopt the fiscal year 2021 budget ordinance reading with the following changes. Off of page 58. Reduce revenues for local option sales tax by $2,220,543. Leave personnel services flat with a reduction of $970,203. Add into the budget on page 70 an amendment that the compensation plan will be based on council approval. Maintenance and operation budgets reduced by $397,309, with departments of reduction of recreation and parks, $253,759, general government, $30,750, legal, $100,000, Mayor and council, $12,800 reductions. Capital initiatives, reduction of sidewalk maintenance and repair of reduce of $50,000. That's on page 26. Storm and drainage maintenance, reduction of $30,000, page 31. Stormwater inspections, reduction of $10,000, page 31. Greenway repair and maintenance, page 30, reduction of $100,000. Parks repairs, page 30, reduction of $20,000. Parks enhancement, page 30, reduction of $30,000. Public arts programs, page 33, reduction of $12,500. An addition of the historic preservation storage project, page 43, addition of $12,500. The flock license plate readers, an addition of $20,000.
Everyone clear on the motion? All those in favor of the motion as read, please vote yes. Otherwise, vote no. Councilman Hymes? And it does pass 4-3.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to request that we get a printout or a book or something that reflects what's been said so that we will have an opportunity before our next meeting to look at those numbers, and if additional changes are warranted, have an opportunity to work off of something that's been passed tonight. So.
I'll make that request of the people who supported the motion. So, and as I look at the people in this audience, I'll do a little housekeeping right now to item C, because I don't believe most of you were here for the earlier scheduled time and attendance data collection system, RFP. So if we can, if no one minds, I'll go ahead and move item C, which is consideration of an ordinance providing for regulations governing use of skateboards and similar devices. This is the first reading, and it's sponsored by Mayor Pro Tem Mitchell and Councilmember Karen Richard. Mr. Thomas, I believe you have this item.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, as you know, a couple of weeks ago, we had a workshop where we considered a draft of a skateboard ordinance, short form, call it skateboards. And we also had an original draft plus a draft that the co-sponsors had put together with some changes. Following that discussion, people expressed ideas. We heard from the public. We heard from the council members. Then the co-sponsors requested me to make certain changes that they wanted to see included in the proposed ordinance. And I attempted to incorporate those into an ordinance, and then I submitted that back to the sponsors and co-sponsor, and they requested a few additional minor changes, which I've made. So that's what's before you tonight. And essentially, what you have, and I'll read the first section because I think it sort of summarizes the main thrust of it. No person shall operate or propel skateboards, longboards, roller skates, and inline skates or other similar devices, collectively skateboards, upon a public alleyway, public sidewalk, public parking lot, public parking garage, or elevated surfaces, which includes rails, ramps, and steps, within the core as shown on the map attached as Exhibit A. So here the main change was we did eliminate streets from that, but otherwise, and we did limit it to the downtown core, and there's a map attached to your ordinance, and I think it was viewed before. I don't have a copy of it to put under there. Maybe James does, but it is attached and is in your packet. So we've greatly reduced the scope of where it would apply. And then in addition to that, we changed the fines. Again, we had the situation where you're dealing with minors. Can't really cite a minor without taking them down to juvenile hall, which we don't want to do. We'll issue warnings to To the parents, if they continue to allow either acquiescing in that or just not supervising, then the parents can also be given a citation, in addition to, of course, adults, 17 years and older who violate it, because it's not all just kids. I think we've seen that particularly in this area from time to time. And we changed the fine system. It would be a $100 fine for first violation, and then subsequent violations, it'd be a minimum of $100 and a maximum of $500, and or 20 hours of community service. So with that, that's, if you have any questions, I'll be happy to try to answer them.
Do we have any questions from council? Not seeing any. Thank you, Sam.
Thank you.
Ms. Cobb, do we have any public comment cards on this item?
We do, sir. I have 3 public comment cards. The first one I have is Holly and Ethan Palmer, 1850 Broadwell Oaks Drive.
Okay, and before we get started, I'll just remind everybody, because there's a few new faces in here, that we generally allow 3 minutes for public comment per person, and please say your name and address for the record.
Hi, everybody. I'm Holly Palmer. It's good to see all of y'all in person. I will say a few things. I was going to let my son, Ethan, here speak first, and then I'll speak after.
Okay?
Good evening. My name is Ethan Palmer, and I'm here representing the population of skateboarders in the downtown Alpharetta area. My first point is that or just recapping, the ordinance states that no person shall operate skateboards, longboards, incline skates, or roller skates on public alleyways, sidewalks, elevated surfaces such as stairs, rails, ledges. What were the others? Point is, it states that it's safer for I as a skateboarder to be in the middle of a road such as Old Milton Parkway, Academy Street, Haynesbridge Road, or any other road in downtown Alpharetta area, compared to me skating in an empty parking lot or the top of a parking garage, which, as I'm sure you're well aware, there's far less vehicular and pedestrian traffic up in those areas, which means there's less risk for a collision. Which basically means it's safer for me. And I find it quite illogical that it is safer, according to this ordinance, that I should be in a road rather than the parking lot or the top of a parking deck. On to my next point. There are so many skateboarders in this area because for one, it's basically a skate park within 100 feet of where I'm standing, out there and out there. There's several stair sets, smooth concrete, ledges, rails, curbs, everything you need in a skate park. Whereas to go to an actual skate park, the nearest one is, a short 30 minutes away up in Fowler Park in Forsyth County. Or what me and my friends are actually going to do shortly after this is another 45-minute drive up to Veterans Park in Cherokee County. I can only do that because I'm fortunate enough to have a car. And I'm old enough to drive, which I know a lot of skateboarders, especially in this area, are not able to do. So they come here. My proposed solution to that problem is to build a skate park. I believe that Union Hill Park is an ideal location for that skate park. It checks all the boxes. It's within a 10-minute drive of the downtown area. There's available space, and there's well more than enough demand for said skate park. And I understand that you can't just throw up a skate park. Like there's a lot more going into that than meets the eye. But it doesn't have to be massive. Just some stair sets, rails, ledges, curbs, manual pads, stuff like that. Maybe some ramps too. And
I'll just remind you that you had 3 minutes, so you need to wrap it up.
My apologies. With that, meaning the skateboards, will have a spot to skate, so we'll be happy, and we won't come here anymore. And the population of skateboarders here will drastically decline very fast, which means you guys won't have to deal with us anymore, which means y'all will be happy. It's a win-win situation. That concludes my main comments on the ordinance. Thank you for listening.
Thank you.
That was pretty good. Had no idea what he was going to say. He actually took a lot of things that I was going to say. I do have one question. Back in November, the Rec Commission came up with some proposed park rules. which they then presented to y'all in December. And I wanted clarification because it says no motorized scooters and then just skateboards. Does that mean no motorized skateboards or just skateboards? Because their proposed park rules that they approved and asked y'all to approve says no motorized skateboards, or excuse me, no motorized scooters, skateboards, e-bikes, or hoverboards in any city park. So my question is, are y'all going to say you can't come downtown, and then when they bring this back, I believe, in the next couple of months, are y'all going to then say you also cannot skate in our parks? Because that's what this is.
Okay, this isn't really a back and forth, but I'll get clarification. I understand. I know. I'll try to get that answer for you once you finish your comments.
My other thing, too, was just to advocate, Councilman Merkel, since you are the Park and Recs liaison, perhaps this is not the best time right after our big budget discussion. But, I mean, everybody is well represented as far as, you got soccer, you got football, y'all all know this. We even have log rolling, we have tree climbing. Dogs even have a park. The one group that doesn't have a park or a place or a class are the skaters, and there's lots of them. So I just ask for you to consider them. They're a cool group, they're fun, they're hip, that's what we want to be. So, thanks, y'all.
Thank you. Ms. Cobb, who was the next comment?
Rachel McDonald, 1125 Admiral Crossing.
Hello, Council. My name is Rachel McDonald. I apologize in advance. I'm going to be talking rather fast because I'm going to try to get this all done in 3 minutes. I'm 15 and a productive member of my community. I enjoy school and a plethora of extracurricular activities during the school week, but on the weekends you can find me in downtown Alpharetta picking up new books from the library, drinking tea at local cafes, and skateboarding and rollerblading alongside my friend Maddie, who lives in the district affected by the newly proposed ordinance. Skateboarding has provided me with a way to feel confident and genuinely joyful. When I'm studying for a stressful exam, I'll text my friend Maddie and say, I can't wait to skate this weekend. I make a point to wear a helmet and skate responsibly. It's frightening to me that my right to skateboard is being impeded upon. The 3 main concerns for skateboarding and rollerblading are noise, destruction of public property, and public safety. Regarding the noise complaints, skateboarding is not especially allowed in comparison to other activities in the city. I personally went to the sidewalks designated in the proposed ordinance and measured the sound levels and decibels of skateboarding and rollerblading. I did so by placing a microphone directly next to the wheels and boards of skates and used 2 separate applications to ensure the accuracy of the results. Doing basic maneuvers on skateboards range from 60 to 75 decibels. These results are virtually identical to those provided in the skate park development guide. This decibel level is approximately the same level of loudness as a typical conversation. It is also less loud than heavy traffic and window air conditioning. That's according to HealthLink.ca and corroborated by multiple licensed medical professionals. On destruction of public property, to suffocate the city under the confines of what's going to keep the paver shiniest is to devalue the experience of community, and it's completely counterintuitive. Any activity will wear pavers, but skating will not do so enough to outweigh the joy that it brings the community. A kid and his or her father should not be stripped of their right to enjoy the sunny afternoon in hopes that it will prevent the erosion that weather conditions could cause on any given day. On public safety, which is inherently the greatest concern, the vehicular traffic in downtown Alpharetta far exceeds the levels of pedestrian traffic. A teenager who is just learning how to skate should not be forced to skate in heavy traffic. I understand the concerns of pedestrian safety, but it's a small minority of skaters who act unruly. In order to ensure that those skaters are held accountable, I suggest that wearing helmets become mandatory, as it is highly unlikely that anyone skating to be a punk is going to wear a helmet, therefore enabling you to cite them while protecting the rights of responsible skaters like me and children and their fathers who are just going to the park to skate or on the streets to skate. In the Alpharetta City Circulation Study of 2003, it discusses that only those experienced on bicycles may feel safe riding in roads, never mind a skateboarder who may not be seen by cars or who's inexperienced maneuvering on roads. By taking away the option of skating on the sidewalk, you're taking away the option of true public safety. Skateboarding is part of this community. I understand that changes must be made. Skating should not be tolerated in parking lots or in garages. Helmets and basic regulations should be enforced. But please, let me have my Saturdays. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Director Rogers, if you don't mind, before we have the next comment, could you address the question about skateboards in parks? I didn't see you back there behind Matt a minute ago.
Yes, the park rules were antiquated, so the commission decided to look at the park rules About 9 months ago. They began looking at the park rules, and within their workshop, they came up with a set of rules. They approved that rules to bring to the council, and it was on the council's agenda the night that got canceled because of the pandemic. So the rules were, the rule is, though, that recommended by the commission for no skateboards in the park. That is
Okay,
because.
so it wasn't
for
just
safety.
motorized skateboards, it was skateboards in the parks are prohibited currently.
But then again, that was going to come to this group for workshop because, the park rules are recommended by the commission but set by the council.
Thank you very much.
We have it, she's correct, we were probably going to bring it back in the next couple of months when things kind of settle down a little bit and bring it forward.
Thank you, sir.
Just if I could ask, sorry, Mr. Mayor.
Councilwoman Richard?
So in our current environment, skateboarding is allowed in parks?
Absolutely.
And Greenway as well?
Yes.
Alpha Loop?
Yes. And the park rules that are coming forward will not take the skateboards off of the Greenway or the Alpha Loop. It's just in the parks.
So the recommendation is to remove it from the parks? Okay, thank you.
Thanks, sir. Director Rogers, I believe Mayor Pro Tem Mitchell has a question for you.
Thank you, Director Rogers. And what was the reason that the Parks and Recreation Commission came up with that
It's
prohibition?
It's for safety. The parks were not designed for as a skate park. There was a couple of things during the conversation was that skateboards, when skaters are trying tricks, the skateboards go flying. We have other people walking in the parks. And the same reason that they were going to ask for bikes not to be in the parks as well. So because of the number of people using the parks, and the parks weren't designed for the skateboards.
Okay, and one other quick question. As regarding Union Hill Park, when you solicited information from the community, there was support for a skate park there, was there not?
Well,
or wherever.
3 years ago, when that park was master planned and approved by the commission and by this group, there was an area that says future skate park / basketball courts. I was not with the city when the Union Hill plan was come through. I will tell you that when we did the master plan, the overall comprehensive master plan for our recreation department, as well as the master plan for Wills Park, there was no public input that said we needed a skate park in those areas. So that's why right now there's not one planned in the city of Alpharetta, because simply it has not been brought forth as an issue.
Okay.
Up till now.
Thank you, sir.
Okay.
Ms. Cobb, do we have any more comment cards?
I have one more, sir.
Thanks, sir. Thank you, ma'am.
Adam Warmouth, 1075 Creek Walk Drive.
Good evening, council. I appreciate this opportunity to speak. Just some comments and general considerations that I wanted to bring up. I am not a minor. I'm 22 years old. I'm a legal adult. You can arrest me. So I would greatly appreciate the reconsideration of these ordinances. Our goal is not to annoy people. It's not to be punk skater kids. We just like to skate, have fun, and enjoy the sidewalks. I'm a taxpayer, so I have also helped pay for some of the facilities. And I understand that with COVID, the budgeting is definitely an issue. You can't just throw up a skate park. But we would be more than open to regulations that don't entirely ban skateboard, such as certain times of the day you can skateboard. Obviously, everybody in downtown Alpharetta deserves their sleep. They deserve to get their rest. I've lived here in Amarantz for about a year, and I'll say loud cars, people yelling and cheering out in the middle of the night. It could be skateboards, it could be cars, it could be anybody. If it's in the middle of the night, it's not appreciated. We would definitely be open to maybe some looser regulations that appease to both sides, because I really would hate to see anyone feel like they lose coming out of this. Thank you.
Thanks, sir. And those were all the comment cards we had? Yes, sir. But if there is someone else that would like to come forward, now's your opportunity to do so. One at a time, please, but feel free. If you don't mind, give your name and address. I know, for the record, in the microphone,
Karen
please.
Bauer. Thank you. I live in Emerance, right across the street. And ironically, tonight, when I was coming over here, two kids on scooters with like three wheels basically almost took me out. So I walk these streets every day, especially the last couple of months. The kids are skateboarding on the art installation down by the garage. They use that as a thing to go up. I've mentioned it, people just ignore it. I've been in the parking deck. There's been families in there. I would say it's not allowed. And the mother's like, I'm just here to pick up my kids. I don't know. So there clearly is a problem. And I know that Melanie, who's the manager of Emerance, has contacted you all that one day she almost saw a skateboarder get hit by a car. So it's going to happen. It's inevitable. They're all over. And so just wanted to bring that to your attention. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Thanks.
Welcome. Name and address,
Mike
please.
Kotzman.
Yeah.
I'm 50. I've never skated a minute of my life, but I'm.
Could you give your address, please?
Oh, it's 105 Trammell Court, 3 blocks that way. So, never skated a minute of my life, but I'm with the skateboarders all the way on this. I think it's great that, well, nowadays, especially with COVID, young people need to get outside, right? So I'm always for, seeing young people, whatever the reason is to get outside, I think it's healthy for them. With skateboarding, I think Wills Park should be open to skateboarders. I'm not in favor of what the proposal is to outlaw skateboarders at Wills Park. For downtown, I think there's always room for compromise, maybe I think the other gentleman mentioned some time limitations or something like that, or some kind of regulations, but it seems like there's definitely room to kind of try to find a happy medium here. So that's really all I had to say. I'm encouraging you guys to work toward a happy medium that tries to make everyone somewhat happy, right? So that's it. Thanks.
Thanks, sir. Is there anyone else that would like to come forward at this time? Please. You don't have to raise your hand. You can just come on up, line up.
My name is Storm Kotzman. I live at 105 Trammell Court also. I don't have too much to say. I guess just looking at this map, if I'm looking at it correctly, I agree with my husband. Well,
Too late. That's on the record.
I agree. I do agree with him. I feel like if downtown, I do get sort of the red brick issue. There's some red brick, on the sidewalks. I do think maybe it's a bit noisier, but I see like Old Milton Parkway is on this map. I just can't see how that should be included. I think that's just sidewalk, even going, I guess that's left, is that on Haynes Bridge in front of Thompson Street? I mean, I think I can sort of understand like the deep part of downtown if you were, looking at this map, going by this map, but some of this is just sort of the outskirts, and I know people live there, but to me, the outskirts don't need to be included in this map, kind of bring it in a little bit. Might be a good compromise. I do feel like if you're taking away downtown, I feel like the parks should be off limits. You should allow skateboards, like at least allow the parks. The kids go, play in the park. I think I was under the impression that the Alpha Loop was being taken away from the skateboarders, but I was wrong about that. So to me, that's a huge one. I would have a big problem with that. To me, that's deciding, by what's fine and what's not. So that's all. That's my 2 cents. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to speak on the skateboarding ordinance? Going once, going twice. So we will go ahead and close public comment at this time. Do I have a motion from council?
Mr. Mayor, I think I neglected to actually read the title into the record.
Oh,
So
please do so, Sam.
A resolution of the mayor, excuse me, that's next. An ordinance of the mayor and council of the city of Alpharetta, Georgia, providing for regulations governing the use of skateboards and similar devices to provide for an effective date for other purposes.
Thank you, sir. Now that we know the title of the ordinance, is there a motion?
I'd like to make a motion that we approve the consideration of an ordinance providing for the regulation, governance, use of skateboards and similar devices for the city of Alpharetta, and ask the mayor. Well, that'll come later. That's it. Thank you.
Second.
I have a motion by Mayor Pro Tem Mitchell and a second by Councilwoman Richard. Any discussion? Councilman Binder.
Just want to thank you, Councilmember Mitchell and Richard. I know it's hard to put your name on something and get it through. I think y'all have done a good job of trying to hear what people's concerns were, and appreciate that you didn't make it so it was everything that the streets were allowed, because I do think skateboarding is transportation. Definitely agree that the parking decks, they should be for cars, and then the sidewalks, we want to make sure we protect pedestrians as the first priority for the sidewalks, because they're the most vulnerable on there. Something that was brought up, I thought the park's new rules, and I just did it verbally and talking, and maybe forgot that we were going to make it so skateboarding was still allowed on the rules. So I know it's not part of this, but I need to know. I'd like to know as part of the decision making what council's feeling on skateboarding to continue to be the for parks, because I think that should be continued allowed. If we're saying you can't skate here, there should be somewhere, and I would like to put a skateboard park somewhere, but as y'all know, and times are a little thin right now, and but it does make sense to have it as park development. So with that, I don't know how it's going to go, but thank y'all for the work you put towards it.
Welcome.
Councilman Burnett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A show of good faith. I'm not fine with this, but we have to read it twice, so in a couple weeks you have to come back and read it again, and that's where it's codified, that information's for free. I would like this map to be a lot smaller, and I would like to let more of the residential areas, I would like it to openly, specifically state where it is. It's completely fine. If I'm on Rucker or Mayfield in a 12-foot wide sidewalk, I want everybody to know, codified, that is okay.
It is right now.
I'm saying it out loud because there's just a part of me that hates myself for this. I'm fine with parking garages. I have been, but I would rather work with you than just be a no, because something, I sat out here all weekend. It's a thing. So I hate to admit that, but it is an issue, and it's safety related. And I don't know where the city's property stops and where the private property begins and ends, and it's dangerous. But I also think Old Milton Parkway, like I said, I think this map deserves to be a lot smaller. So I hope you guys hear me. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor?
Councilman Merkel and then Mayor Pro Tem Mitchell.
Would it be appropriate at this time for a subsequent motion?
You don't need anybody to allow you to make one. You've got the floor, so.
Yeah, so at this time, I'd like to make a subsequent motion. I get it. I've been down here a bunch myself. I've seen it. I've talked to the folks. I find it ironic, though, that we keep talking about all these complaints yet, and I appreciate these. I mean, I get it. I take it into consideration. We had one objection tonight. We had one objection the night of the workshop. So, I've gotten an email from somebody down around the corner at Teasley Place. So I've had less than 5 people contact me that this is a problem. So I go back to Mr. Hypes' presentation, or his discussion last week, that it sounds like a bunch of old people just complaining about the kids. The kids are out making noise. Make them be quiet. It's bothering me. And that's where it all started. For months, the only complaints we got was noise, 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 noise. And then when we pointed out to some residents that they left cul-de-sac gated communities and moved into a downtown environment, all of a sudden they're like, whoa, wait a minute, we got noise down here. And some of you even come up here and said, look, I expected there to be noise. I knew there was going to be backup beepers and trash takeout, but this skateboarding thing, it's just out of hand. So for that reason, I'm going to offer a subsequent motion to preclude skateboarding in City of Alpharetta downtown parking garages and downtown surface parking lots. If people are concerned about the dangers, to me, those are the most dangerous places because of blind turns, and again, they're designed for cars. There's no sidewalks in them, there's no place to go, so you put it dangerous. So my subsequent motion would be to replace this motion previously presented with one that states no skateboarding as it's defined in here with the various boards and three-wheelers and whatever in city public parking decks and downtown public parking surfaces.
We have a motion by Councilman Merkel, a second by Councilman Hydes. Any discussion?
I would just add to that, we can always add on. If this has the potential maybe to curb some of this that's going on out there, some kids get busted in the parking deck and their parents get called and they say you can't do this, it may draw a bunch of them out. We don't know. But if you go full-blown like this, it'll never come back. You will never get a piece of it back. More than likely, I never say never, but I'd like to make this a starting point, and again, we can continue the discussion. So.
Any other discussion? Councilman Hydes?
I want to join the others in thanking those who brought the motion forward to get it to council's attention. And I've always been, since it's come up, supportive of banning skateboarding especially in the parking garage. The whole downhill slalom course is not a good mixture. At the risk of covering a little ground from the workshop, my starting point on this entire analysis has been the ask is to take away an existing right for our citizens and our taxpayers. And when I'm asked that question and confronting that situation, I want to know what the reasons are. And I want to know how broad this restriction and depriving of a right is going to be. And I'm privy to the same emails that we all received from December through early March, and they were all about noise. And I have the emails saved, and they are about noise. They are not about danger. On the issue of safety, I would love to have an entirely danger-free, safe world in all respects. This morning I was talking with somebody and two dogs started getting rowdy with each other, and I got wrapped up in a leash this morning. Dogs can be dangerous and yap at each other. I'm not going to ban dogs from downtown. I practically live down here. I don't live down here, but I practically do because I'm so close by. I've been making note. The bikes outnumber the skateboards at least 10 to 1 on the sidewalks, at least. Sit outside for lunch and watch the bicycles go by, watch them in and out of the pedestrians. I'm not banning bicycles from downtown. This morning, at lunchtime, I walked back from Smoke Jack down to my office, and a jogger came by, actually made contact with my shoulder. I'm not going to bar joggers from downtown. And let's not get started on the cars. Sit in the Adirondacks at Turinga and watch the cars speed, watch the cars blow through the hawk light while it's red. But we're not going to bar cars from going through downtown. We will not make the entire downtown safe. We have picked out and isolated one population, a youthful population, which gets me to another point in terms of the breadth of this. Thursday, walking home from work, I was going through the park back here, and I met a man and his granddaughter. The granddaughter was riding this little blade scooter. She's 5 years old. The man does not want us to ban his daughter's ability to ride this vehicle on the sidewalks and in this park. He lives in Amarance. I took all these pictures of the bicycles going through. On my walk home on the corner of Haynesbridge and Academy, a young lady who might be a friend of this lady over here, I'm not sure, she was roller skating home. She lives right over here in the neighborhood. She allowed me to take a picture of her lace-up roller skates. I think she's about 13 if I was to guess. I asked her, how often do you roller skate? And she says, almost every day. This will be illegal under this ordinance. I was having lunch over at Mini Olivia. A young man comes up on his skateboard, and he's showing up for work. He lives out Rucker Road. His skateboard is his means of getting to work. It's his transportation. This ordinance will take away his ability to do that, but we don't have to worry. We got cars and we have licenses. But that's how he gets around. I'm troubled by the size of the map or even changing the size of the map because when you talk about city center, I've asked, but I have not yet heard that city center has passed any rules whatsoever with respect to skateboarding. They want us to be elected officials, but they want us to be the HOA, the property manager, the property owner association for city center. They've got their own property. Avalon takes care of their property. They haven't lifted a finger or done a thing about their property that they have every right to control that has nothing to do with the city sidewalks. We talk with this banners on the posts throughout town that we're live, work, and play. The old folks can live down here. The old folks can work down here. And us folks who have extra time, we can play down here, but not. We're going to tell the 15-year-olds who live nearby, you can't play down here, which troubles me. Because a lot of the older folks moved in down here. But for the younger folks, they were born and raised here. This is their home. This is where they find their sense of belonging. When I was 15 years old, nobody told me I didn't belong somewhere where I was growing up. But we want to sit up here in judgment, not of the dog owners, not of the bike owners, not of the car owners, not of the joggers. We're going to tell these kids and the ones with the lace-up roller skates, you don't belong here. Go do something else. Go somewhere else. I find it ironic that we're projecting to spend $10 million or whatever it is on the Alpha Loop, certainly millions of dollars on the Alpha Loop. And we're going to make darn sure if we pass this ordinance that nobody on a skateboard will get from that side of town to the entrance to the Alpha Loop because we're going to have it blocked off with a law that says you can't get there on a skateboard or roller skates or inline skates or anything else. I know this is, in the grand scheme of things with coronavirus and rioting, kind of a small issue, but it's not to the people whose rights you're taking away. Everybody's rights has to be looked at equally. If you're not willing to fight for the underdog and the small guy, and if all you want to do is take care of the people who want to brag about how much money they spend on where they live so they can get their way at the expense of the little guy, then you would vote for this. But if you want to protect the little guy who's already got these rights and not take their rights away, then I would support the substitute motion by Councilmember Merkel.
Any other comments from council?
Mine has to do with this motion that's presented.
I'm sorry, I didn't understand what you're saying.
Yes, I have a comment.
Mayor Pro Tem Mitchell.
It's amazing to me how many people I've spoken with who are concerned about their own public safety. And if it's an elderly lady who's just wanting to walk down the sidewalk to get to the restaurant, doesn't she have rights? Doesn't she have concern as a tax-paying citizen? Or if you live here in the city, you have just as much a right to peace and quiet and safety when you're walking down the sidewalks. Mr. Palmer, Ms. McDonald, Mr. Warmoth, and to the Coxmans, thank you. Your comments were eloquent and well beyond your years, even the Coxmans. So, thank you for what you've said, and I hear that, and you do have rights within our city. We're not limiting. The first ordinance that Karen and I didn't have anything to do with, it was actually proposed by a council member speaking with Sam, and it was a citywide ordinance, and we came back and we said, no, that's way too much. That's too intensive to cut out all the city. And it's most of our impression that you can skate in the park, you just can't have a motorized skateboard or a motorized scooter. So we'll have to address that. I don't think anyone on council, I can't speak for the whole council, Lord knows. The fact that this is a decision that's hard to weigh on is a good thing, because it shows that both people, there's folks on all sides of it. But we have tons of citizens who have spoken out and who have emailed us, and maybe we need to go back and check our emails. And a lot of the folks who spoke out again in favor of this ordinance can't be here tonight because of COVID and complications with their health, but they very much have spoken through email and conversations. And maybe they mailed the whole council, maybe they didn't. But we limited it to as small an area as we could geographically where as not to affect anybody. We can look at making that smaller. I'm more than willing to look at that, as long as we take care of the residential areas where the folks have complained about it. And Mr. Palmer, you very eloquently brought up the fact that it's more dangerous to skate, and the reason the streets were excluded, even in city center, was because some people use long skateboards as a mode of transportation. And that may be you, I don't know. But that's why that was excluded. But we're certainly not, through this ordinance, we weren't trying to encourage kids to get on the streets. So, but thank you for bringing that up. But we're trying to be fair and equitable to as many people as we can. I know it's not, and I want to say this, I will be the first one to support a skate park as soon as we get back to a financial footing where we can look into that, because I do think we need it. It may not be at Union Hill, it may be somewhere closer, so that most folks can get to it easily. So thank you.
Any other comments from council? All right, so Councilman Merkel, do you mind reading your motion again? It's been a little while.
So, speaking of simplifying it, my motion would replace this motion. My motion would be to exclude skateboarding and the descriptions thereafter that are in this motion as to defining what those wheeled devices are in downtown city-owned parking decks and downtown city-owned surface parking, period.
Okay, we're all clear on the motion? All those in favor of the motion, please vote yes, otherwise vote accordingly. And the motion fails 4-3. So we'll go back to the original motion, if y'all don't mind reading that one again, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to make a motion for the consideration of an ordinance providing for regulations governing the use of skateboards and similar devices, and this is our first reading.
Do you have any?
Second, I really seconded, but.
Well, that's why I wasn't calling for a second. I was just
Sorry.
clarifying the motion since it had been a while, but I appreciate the confusion. It's been an interesting evening. So that is the motion on the table. All those in favor, please vote yes, otherwise vote no. And it does pass 4-3. So now we'll go back to the originally scheduled item B, which is time and attendance data collection system RFP 20-115. Director Harris, you have the floor, sir.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Before you is award of RFP 20-115 for time and attendance data collection system software to Andrews Technology. As you know, over the years, our department's been trying to move a lot more towards automation and get away from the paper process. We've done that with our RFPs and our bid process, including our purchase order process and things. But in this area, we've not made a move yet for some time. Obviously, we do have software that produces payroll. It's the time entry system that is very manual process with literally timesheets for the most part. And I think the desire was when we brought this in mid-year and we got the mid-year budgeting was that we got to get out of that eventually, obviously, and try to gain some efficiencies by more, easier, more advanced methods of gathering that kind of times from cell phones, from biometric time clocks, geofencing when they get into an area, et cetera, and try to get that. Public safety has also been for years, we're going to go down this a year or two ago, but they wanted to look at advanced scheduling because part of their job is just trying to keep their schedules of all their personnel and those obviously complex schedules and sometimes swapping out time, et cetera. So we did finally put an RFP together. We got 8 responses. Andrews Technology scored the highest. Best rated by a committee that was made up of every department in the city. And mainly at the end, it came down to following up on some customers, city of Woodstock, et cetera, and public safety did some of those phone calls and they feel very comfortable that it's working at Woodstock and we need to go in that direction. So that is before you this evening, about approximately $42,000 a year.
Thanks, sir. Any questions from council at this time? Thank you. Ms. Cobb, do we have any public comment cards on this item?
We do not, sir.
Okay. But if anyone wants to come forward and speak on this item, now's your chance. Don't all rush down here at once. Okay, so we'll go ahead and close public comment. Do I have a motion from council?
Yes, sir, Mr. Mayor, I'd offer a motion tonight to accept the time and attendance data collection system as presented by Director Harris tonight.
Second.
I have a motion by Councilman Merkel, a second by Councilman Burnett. Any discussion? Thanks, Tom. I appreciate your work on this. Well, I would call for the vote. I'll see if we can give Councilman Binder a moment to make it back on this item in case he's going to come back shortly. All right, it's already late. So all those in favor of the motion to approve the time and attendance data collection system RFP 20-115, please vote yes. Otherwise, vote no, with Councilman Binder absent, and it does pass 6-0. So the next item up on the agenda is the resolution approval of 2020 Bulletproof Vest Partnership Grant application. Director Robinson, you have the floor. Mr. Thomas, you will be reading this one.
Good evening. We are requesting approval to submit a grant application for the BGA for a 2020 Bulletproof Vest Grant, 50% match requirement from the city, totaling $17,158, and if it's awarded, with total funding for the initiative would be a grant and match components of $34,317. And if approved and we get the grant, that would get us 31 bulletproof vests for our officers.
Thanks, sir. Any questions for Director Robinson? Appreciate your efforts on this. Ms. Cobb, do we have any public comment cards?
Mr. Mayor, you want me to read the
Oh,
resolution?
see, I almost skipped over you, Sam. That's why I reminded you earlier. You got to keep me straight. That's what attorneys are for.
A resolution to authorize the mayor and city council to approve the submission of the 2020 Bulletproof Vest Partnership Grant to the U.S. Department of Justice. Whereas the U.S. Department of Justice Office of Justice Programs and Bureau of Justice Assistance made available funding under the Bulletproof Vest Partnership Grant Act of 2000, and whereas such funds may be used to help purchase approved bulletproof vests for eligible law enforcement officers, and whereas the application this round is to fund bulletproof vests purchased on or after June 8, 2020, and whereas the city of Alpharetta has applied for funding through the program, and whereas the funding, if awarded, shall be utilized to help purchase new vests for Alpharetta police officers, and whereas evidence authorizing the acceptance of the said application must be provided. Now therefore be it so resolved this 26th day of May 2020 by the Mayor and Council of the City of Alpharetta that the submission of the 2020 Bulletproof Vest Partnership Grant application is hereby approved, and if awarded, the Mayor is hereby authorized to execute the award package with directives under the Bulletproof Vest Partnership Grant Program.
Mr. Thomas, Councilmember Burnett wanted to know if we have to change the date.
Which date are we referring to?
I don't know.
May 26th, 24th? You read it in the, I didn't know if it needed to be June 1st.
It does need to be June 1st.
See?
You're correct. So I correct that. Thank you.
All right, sir. Now that the resolution has been read and the date was corrected, do we have any public comment cards, Ms. Cobb?
We do not, sir.
But if anyone wants to come forward and speak on the approval of the 2020 Bulletproof Vest Partnership Grant application, here's your shot. Seeing no one, we'll close public comment. Do I have a motion from council?
Mr. Mayor, I make a motion to the council approve the 2020 Bulletproof Vest Partnership Grant application as presented by Attorney Sam Thomas with city funding not to exceed $17,158.
Had a motion by Councilman Hypes, a second by Councilman Merkel. Any discussion? All right, I'll call for a vote on the motion. The motion was to approve the resolution approval of the 2020 Bulletproof Vest Partnership Grant application. Please vote yes if you approve the motion, otherwise vote no, and it does pass unanimously. Next item up on the new business items is RFP 20-121, on-call electrical services for parks. Director Rogers, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We're here tonight to ask for approval of a 5-year contract with Mir Electric to provide on-call services for the recreation, parks, and cultural services. This is the third contract that we've done with an electric company in 5-year increments. Mir has done the two prior contracts. We did put out an RFP. We had four companies to bid. Mir Electric was far and beyond the best candidate, and so we're asking for approval of that contract, and it's on as-needed basis for the 5 years.
Thanks, sir. Any questions from council on this? Mayor Pro Tem Mitchell, you have the floor.
Thank you. Mr. Rogers, this is who you've used for a number of years?
I'm sorry?
This is who you've used for a number of years, is that correct?
It's been 2 5-year contracts up till now, yes.
I think they're one of your best partners, are they not?
Yes, they are. They're extreme, they respond very quickly and very appropriately.
It's good to hear. Thank you.
Any other questions from Director Rogers? Seeing none, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Ms. Cobb, do we have any public comment cards on this item?
We do not, sir.
But if anybody wants to come forward and speak on RFP 20-121 on-call electrical services for parks, here's your chance. Seeing no one, we'll close public comment. Have a motion from council?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I would offer a motion to approve RFP 20-121 on-call electrical service for parks with Mir Electric as presented tonight by Mr. Rogers.
Second.
Have a motion by Councilman Merkel, a second by Mayor Pro Tem Mitchell. Any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call for a vote on the motion. To approve, vote yes, otherwise vote no. And it does pass unanimously. Item F on new business is Greenway Pedestrian Bridge Erosion Control. Director Rogers, you have the floor again.
We're here tonight to ask for approval of a contract with Tri-Scapes to complete the Greenway Pedestrian Bridge erosion control repairs in the amount of $97,748.35. During the floods of 2019, we became a issue, came forward, and so I decided to take a couple of pictures and show you those issues tonight. Or at least I hope. I hope I'm going to do that.
Every computer is different.
No, it's not seeing your display setting right now.
So while James is trying to bail me out, the bridge is located just south of Kimball Bridge. It is a pedestrian bridge that goes over Big Creek near Rock Mill Park. The bridge is basically the pillars are concrete and the bridge is on top of those, and the water is eating underneath the concrete pillars. If not fixed, then the bridge will eventually collapse, and as that erosion goes forward, it gets a little bit, every time it rains, particularly some of the rains we've been having, it gets a little bit there. So just wanted to show you you can see that's one of the photos that you can see it, and then the next photo I hope that comes up, you can actually see the depth of that erosion there, and that's one of the main crossings there. So be glad to answer any questions that you may have.
Any questions from council on this item? Thank you, Director Rogers.
Thank you.
Ms. Cobb, any public comment cards?
We do not, sir.
However, this is your last chance to comment on the Greenway Pedestrian Bridge erosion control if you've been dying to do so. Seeing no one come forward, I'll close public comment. Do I have a motion from council?
Yes, sir, Mr. Mayor, for a motion to approve the Greenway Pedestrian Bridge erosion control repairs using Tri-Scapes at the dollar amount of $97,748.35, as was presented tonight by Director Rogers.
Second.
I have a motion by Councilman Merkel, a second by Councilman Burnett. Any discussion? I'll call for a vote. All those in favor of the motion to approve Greenway Pedestrian Bridge erosion control in the amount of 94,000, and what was that cents? I lost that page. 35 cents. Up to that amount, please vote yes, otherwise vote no. And it does pass unanimously. Item G this evening, Memorandum of Understanding between the City of Alpharetta and the Wills Park Equestrian Foundation. Morgan Rogers, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Excited to bring this forward. This is an memorandum of understanding between the City of Roswell and the Wills Park Equestrian. What did I say? What did I say? City of Roswell. Yeah, at least $1. Okay, between the City of Alpharetta and the Wills Park Equestrian Foundation. Kind of took some of the excitement away, didn't it? We've been talking about a foundation forming for many years to help bring the Wills Park Equestrian Center back to the standard that Alpharetta would like to have it done. The city actually put $250,000 in the budget 2 years ago with the idea that if the foundation would raise money, then they would match that. Well, the foundation formed, they got their 501c3 status, and they've raised $250,000. They have it in the bank. So now we're bringing the MOU forward that basically outlines how the city and the foundation are going to interact in moving forward to improve the Wills Park Equestrian Center. And we do have Cheryl Sims with us tonight, who is the president of the foundation. If you have any questions of her about the foundation or me of the city's input, we'll be glad to answer them at this time.
Which city?
Alpharetta.
Okay, just check.
Did I say it again?
No, I'm teasing. I'm teasing. It's getting late. Do we have any questions for Director Rogers or about the agreement? Thanks, sir. Do we have any public comment cards?
Do not, sir.
But if there's anyone here that came down especially for this item, now's your opportunity to speak. Seeing no one, we'll close public comment. Do I have a motion from council?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, we're on a roll here, so I'll go ahead and take this one as well. To request approval of the memorandum of understanding between the City of Alpharetta and the Wills Park Equestrian Foundation as presented by Director Rogers and as stated in this packet.
We have a motion by Councilman Merkel and a second by Councilman Binder. Any discussion? Councilman Binder.
I don't get to make the motions anymore, but I am still very excited that this came through. It's been a lot of years' work between Morgan and staff and Cheryl, so just real proud of this day. We don't get a lot of good news right now, so this is one that I think it'll be a long-term partnership that will continue on forward. So just thank you all very much for your dedication.
Any other comments from council? I'll call for a vote on the motion to approve the MOU, Memorandum of Understanding between the City of Alpharetta and the Wills Park Equestrian Foundation. All those in favor of the motion, please vote yes. Otherwise, vote no. Does pass unanimously. Congratulations. That's a good one. Next item up is the Phase 1 of the Wills Park Equestrian Center renovations to include a new arena and parking lot. Director Rogers, you're on a roll. Don't stop now.
Okay, so we're asking tonight approval of a purchase order with Pond, who is our city's on-call contractor for park planning, to provide for Phase 1 of the Wills Park Equestrian Center's master plan, to include the schematic drawings, design development, construction documents, infiltration test, and permitting for the new arena and parking lot according to the master plan. And that is an amount of $75,620, half of which will be paid for by the foundation. I'll be glad to answer any questions that you may have.
Director Rogers, was this in the budget that was just passed today?
It's in our current budget.
The one that was approved, so it's in the 2020?
Yes.
This item?
Yes.
Okay, that's what I was trying to clarify. Thank you. Any other questions from council? All right. Thanks, sir.
Thank you.
Ms. Cobb, do we have any public comment cards?
We do not, sir.
If there's anyone that wants to speak, now's your opportunity. I'll go ahead and close public comment, seeing no one. Do I have a motion from council?
Yes, sir, Mr. Mayor, I offer a motion to approve Phase 1 of the Wills Park Equestrian Center renovations to include a new arena and parking lot with our partnership with the foundation as presented with you here tonight. $37,810.
Second.
I have a motion by Councilman Merkel, a second by Councilman Binder. Any discussion? Well, I'll make a discussion point just because it breaks my heart. But after the decision that was made earlier about the budget and the cuts that we're talking about, this isn't a need to have. I love this. But if we can't give our employees the raises that we paid in last year's budget, and we can't afford to do that in this environment, $37,000 on the equestrian center is not something I can support at this point. So I won't be able to support the motion, unfortunately, although I supported this item for years. So that being said, all those in favor of the motion to approve the Phase 1 of the Wills Park Equestrian Center renovations to include a new arena and parking lot, an amount not to exceed $37,810, please vote yes. Otherwise, vote no. And it does pass, 6-1. Item I on the agenda this evening, and you'll be glad to know, Director Rogers, this is not you. This is cooperative agreement with Fulton County Community Development Block Grant Program. Assistant City Administrator James Drinkard and Mr. Thomas will be reading the resolution.
Mayor and council, sometimes I come before you with interesting items, and sometimes I come before you with things like this. The city of Alpharetta could, on its own, operate and competitively apply for community development block grants. However, for many years, we have worked cooperatively with Fulton County. Fulton County is what is referred to as an entitlement community, which means they get a designated pool of funds, and then we can put projects forward to the county, so we do not have to compete with the larger pool. It also means that some of the reporting requirements and things like that are handled by the county rather than the city. All of that's important because community development block grants are intended for low to moderate income beneficiary, things that benefit low to moderate income individuals. We do not have very many of those, and the ones that we do have are typically small. For instance, the last one that we were able to actually use CDBG funds for was the purchase of a 20 passenger, I believe, van for the senior center. So if we were applying within the federal pool, the likelihood of us being successful would be almost nil. And the cost of managing the grant really can't be justified by the size of the grant we would typically get. But because of the agreement with Fulton County, it can from time to time make sense. They request every 3 years that we re-up our agreement with them. That's what's before you tonight. It does not cost us anything, and the only time we actually would do anything is if there is a project for which we can use CDBG funds, for which it would qualify, and then we would put that in front of the pool. And I can tell you that every year Fulton County is knocking on our door to see if we have something. They want to work with us. They want to have CDBG projects up here. It's just rare that we have ones that could work. So I'll be glad to answer any questions, but that's what is in front of you tonight. There is a resolution for Mr. Thomas.
Any questions before we read the resolution? Mr. Thomas, you have the floor.
A resolution of the Mayor and Council of the City of Alpharetta, Georgia, authorizing the execution of an agreement with Fulton County for the purposes of being included in the Fulton County Community Development Block Grant and for other purposes. Whereas the City of Alpharetta, Georgia desires to be included as part of the Fulton County Community Development Block Grant, CDBG, ESG, and HOME programs for federal fiscal years 2021, 2022, and 2023 to be automatically renewed thereafter. And whereas the attached cooperation agreement has been prepared for said purposes, and whereas the evidence authorizing execution of said agreement must accompany the agreement upon its submission to the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. Now therefore, be it resolved by the Mayor and Council of the City of Alpharetta, Georgia, that 1, the attached cooperation agreement is hereby approved, and 2, the Mayor is hereby authorized to execute said agreement in accordance with directives on the CDBG program. So resolved this first day of June 2020.
Thanks, sir. Ms. Codd, do we have any public comment cards on this?
We do not, sir.
But if anybody would like to speak on the cooperative agreement with Fulton County Community Development Block Grant Program, now's your shot. And we'll close public comment, seeing none. Do I have a motion from council?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I'd offer a motion to approve the cooperative agreement with Fulton County Community Development Block Grant Program as presented tonight by Director Drinkard, Mr. James Drinkard.
Second.
We have a motion by Councilman Merkel and a second by Councilman Binder. Wrong side. Councilman Burnett. All those in favor of the motion to approve the cooperative agreement with Fulton County Community Development Block Grant Program, please vote yes. Otherwise, vote no. It does pass unanimously. We have reached the final item on our agenda this evening for new business, that is. And that's the proposed resolution calling for State of Georgia fiscal year 2021 budget to include funding for the new Now Comp waiver recipients. This was something that I did sponsor, and not to create any confusion, this is not for the budget here locally. This is a budget item on the state legislative agenda. And I'll ask Sam to read the resolution. I was the sponsor of this, although I think there was support from other council members. There is a councilwoman in Johns Creek, Stephanie Andres, whose son is special needs. She's aware of this program, and there have been discussions, given the budget cuts proposed at the state level, that this program, which is very valuable to special needs families in supporting young people and young adults that have special needs, she asked that some of the local councils support this resolution, and I think it's a worthy cause. I think if there's people in this world who need to be supported in these trying times, this is certainly a good case for that. And I believe in discussions I've had with some of the other council members that there is support for this, so I ask that it be brought forward. Mr. Thomas, could you please read the resolution?
A resolution of the Mayor and Council of the City of Alpharetta, Georgia, calling for the State of Georgia fiscal year 2021 budget to include funding for the new now comp waiver recipients to provide for an effective date and for other purposes. Whereas the City of Alpharetta, Georgia is a municipal corporation duly created by the General Assembly of the State of Georgia, the city, and where it is the duty and obligation of the Mayor and the City Council to represent the interests of all residents of the city, and whereas during 2018, the city, together with the cities of Johns Creek, Milton, and Roswell, collaborated to bring together the private and public sector services, resources, and activities to better serve the special needs community, residents with disabilities in North Fulton County. And whereas at the age of 18, all individuals are legally mature adults who are responsible for their own financial needs, and many individuals with disabilities in the special needs community are dependent on Medicaid and other government services to live independently. Whereas the new options waiver now and the Comprehensive Support Waiver Program, COMP, offer home and community-based services for people with developmental and/or intellectual disabilities, which include cognitive impairments or other closely related conditions such as cerebral palsy, epilepsy, autism, or neurological problems. And whereas these intellectual and developmental disabilities require a level of care provided in an intermediate care facility for people who have cognitive impairments, and whereas the NOW waiver program enables individuals with less intense and urgent needs than out-of-home residential treatment or extensive waiver services to live independently in the community, and whereas the COMP waiver program is for individuals who need comprehensive and intensive services to live in the community, individuals eligible for the COMP waiver program need out-of-home residential support and supervision or intensive in-home services to remain in the community. And whereas the goals for participants in the NOW program include: 1, increasing the independence and quality of life for people with developmental disabilities; 2, supporting families and caring for relatives with developmental disabilities; 3, increasing the flexibility of service planning and delivery to meet an individual's needs; and 4, avoiding the need for more intensive services. And whereas eligible individuals include people who are considering nursing institutional care, such as intermediate care facilities for people with cognitive impairments, may be eligible for home and community-based services as an alternative through Georgia's Medicaid waiver program. In order to qualify for the waiver programs, and the individual must first meet the criteria for Medicaid payment in an institution and certain other criteria. And whereas annually there are more people with intellectual and/or developmental disabilities that remain on a state planning list, also referred to as the waiting list, who qualify and need resources from the NOW COMP waiver program. Annually budgeted allocations for new waivers are limited, and the state planning list continues to carry over and over each year. And whereas the proposed state budget for fiscal year 2021 excludes any new NOW COMP waivers, and therefore the state planning list will either remain constant or grow in volume for fiscal year 2020. Now therefore be it resolved that the Mayor and City Council of the City of Alpharetta do respectfully request that Governor Brian Kemp and the Georgia State Legislature reintroduce into the July 1, 2020, June 30, 2021 budget funding for NOW COMP waivers at a level greater than the fiscal year 2020 budget.
Thanks, sir. Anyone on council have a question? Councilman Burnett? That'd be preferable. If it's just a comment, wait till we have a motion or something, if you don't mind. Any questions about the resolution? Okay. Thank you, sir. Do we have any public comment cards on this item, Ms. Cobb?
We do not, sir.
Thank you. Now's your opportunity to come forward and speak on the now comp waivers. If you would like to speak so. Seeing no one, we'll close public comment on that item as well. Call for a motion from council.
Yes, sir, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to make a motion that we approve the resolution of the Mayor and City Council of the City of Alpharetta, Georgia, calling for the State of Georgia fiscal year 2021 budget to include funding for the new Now Comp waiver recipients and to provide for an effective date and for other purposes.
Second.
We have a motion by Mayor Pro Tem Mitchell and a second by Councilman Burnett. Any discussion? Councilman Burnett?
I would like to give Stephanie a compliment. It is an awful lot of work to get organized enough to get your neighbors and your municipalities and the people. It's trying to push anything down at the state is not easy, and I think she's somebody I agree with as often as I don't agree with, but there's no doubt how passionate she is, and I just think that is a really, really awesome thing, because I've never sat here and pled with municipalities to try to pass something for a like-minded issue, and I think it's really special. Thank you.
Any other discussion from council? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor of the motion on the proposed resolution calling for State of Georgia fiscal year 2021 budget to include funding for new Now Comp waiver recipients, please vote yes, otherwise vote no. And it does pass unanimously. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Now, if you've been sitting here waiting for your final opportunity to make a public comment, we will open the floor for public comment. Seeing no one, we will close the floor for public comment. Any reports this evening? Councilman Merkel.
Yes, we had the sign hanging ceremony this afternoon for the new park on Windward Parkway. It beyond my expectations, blew it away. It was noted at that ceremony, I'd like to bring up here tonight, to thank Councilman Binder, because he was a big part of that, a big push. I can't tell how many meetings we had sitting around going, well, what do we do with this soccer field that has very little parking and no bathrooms, and it just kind of sat locked. And so Councilman Richards and Councilman Mitchell and the mayor and I were out there today, and it was a really, really cool occasion. So thank you, Jason, and everybody needs to get out and check out this park, especially if you have kids. So, and thank you, Morgan.
Councilman Hypes.
Just want to give a public thanks to our Public Safety Department. They plan ahead, they anticipate, they do their jobs very well and very professionally, and had plans in place to keep our city safe, and very much appreciate their professionalism and how they went about their job this week.
Councilman Binder.
I'd like to, one of the neat things during this time is seeing how the community individuals step up to volunteer. One of them was a neighbor of mine working with Valerie Fulkerson, working with a group called North Fulton Masketeers, and they've created, they've sewed together several masks and trying to distribute as much as possible to healthcare workers, employees, and people that are out here today while we're still doing social distancing. So they donated 50 masks to City Hall, and I know they can be used throughout the time, so just really want to appreciate their volunteer service towards it.
Any other council reports? Director Regis.
Mayor and Council, a quick operations update. First with community development. Last week was only, if you recall, a 4-day work week. So 274 inspections. We issued 10 new residential permits, 3 new commercial permits. Brought in over almost $200,000 in revenue. And most of that came from the new hotel in town that's just coming up out of the ground. So exciting to see that going on. And we Actually had 27 new business license permits last week, so good to hear that. June 1st today, so we opened up the town green. It's back open. We opened up the playgrounds in the parks. We opened up the park pavilions. The equestrian center for rental now is open. And today we had 136 happy campers in our Parks Camp program. So things are coming along well.
Thank you, Bob. Please pass along my congratulations to your staff for making that happen. Any other council reports? All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your patience. Appreciate your support. Stay safe, and we'll see you next time.